Well, hey there, you two, y'all, everybody. It's Monday, and also look who just walked in. Come in. Come here. Good girl. Yeah. What excellent timing. Also, I randomly decided to put lipstick on today. You're welcome. I have no reason, none whatsoever. I have it, and it's nice, and I felt like it. Probably should have done it yesterday for Chinese New Year because, red. But I was also eating a ton of food yesterday, so that reduces the appeal of lipstick. What are you yelling for? That doesn't usually play out loud. She's like, what the fuck? Also, I don't know how much that echoed because I don't usually have sound coming through my speakers, but do I need to, I don't know, scooch it down a little but yeah, anyway, welcome here. Happy Monday. Hope that you guys had a nice weekend. Ben goes, yes, the Chinese Super New Year Bowl. Yeah. I mean, technically Chinese New Year was Saturday, but yeah, we got together with some friends yesterday for Chinese New Year. It was very nice. And because someone else ordered, like, one of our friends made a ton of fantastic homemade food, but we also supplemented with some Chinese food from a restaurant. And the person that ordered it ordered from a place that is relatively near to me. And because of that, they have now reminded me that that is the restaurant where I got my favorite crispy pork with fried garlic, previously, because I couldn't remember which restaurant it was, because I've tried like 3 or 4 that are like super close to me, and I just could not remember which one had the pork that I liked, and so now I know, and I'm very excited. And I ate so much of it yesterday. And yeah, like there's like an entire fucking head of garlic, bulb of garlic, that's the word I'm looking for, just sliced up and fried so it's crispy. It's so good, so good. And like, you thought it was the super deep state bowl this year. Yeah, I mean, I have ironically, not ironically, maybe it is, I don't know, I guess it depends on your expectations, but I feel like I've heard literally nothing about the Super Bowl this year, like, aside, like, there was the whole conspiracy stuff, but outside of that, like, I haven't heard who won. I haven't heard of any good commercials. I haven't heard anything about the halftime show. I haven't even heard about the conspiracy theory since yesterday. So, but I mean, maybe I just live under a gamer rock, which is, I mean, yes, that is, I do, in fact. So maybe that's the whole thing, and there's no secrets there, but sweet Canadian child. There is also that. But yeah, I don't care about the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, I don't. I barely even care about the Grey Cup. But Canada isn't in the NFL, so I don't care. Because we have our own version, and I like it better. I missed the Dark Brandon tweet. Oh no. There's also the Black National Anthem controversy. What the fuck does that mean? Oh god. You know what? I don't know if I want to know. Do I want to know? Probably not. Look at this sulky child. She's just like, I come here and you pet me, and then you stop petting me, and I cry. Yeah. Oh, baby. Yeah. I don't think she counts me looking at her on the monitor as looking at her. Yeah. We almost got, like, we did, like, straight up get a happy face for, like, half a second there. There we go. Oh, yeah. It's not lasting, but it's there. Child. Baby girl. Aww. So cute. So cute. But yeah, I don't understand why Twitch won't break up more categories. Like, I know at least 3 people, including myself, that do book reading stuff. Why is there no reading a book category? Why is everything that is not video game or cooking or hot tubs just chatting? Why? I hate it. Because, like, I don't know, whatever. I guess it can go based off titles, but, like, how, even from a viewer perspective, how do you know what you're getting into with a Just Chatting stream if Just Chatting is everything? So, I don't know. It bugs me. There is a category called Reading Fun, and there's no, like, picture on it, and I don't think that it's an actual game, but I can't tell if it actually isn't or not. And it's teeny, so I don't know. Whatever. Here we are. We're not doing WoW tonight, so we'll see. We'll see if Just Chatting makes me want to die tonight. Temporarily make one of you a mod just for Mondays. We do once again have gin and cranberry juice today. It was apple juice last time. Was that last week? God, time is broken. I can't remember. It was last week, wasn't it? We did this last week, right? Why don't I remember if it was last week or the week before? I don't know. Anyway, I would love so very much if we could get through 2 chapters tonight instead of just 1. But it also took me 45 minutes to read a chapter out loud last week. So we will see. We will see how it goes. But yeah, this time I actually, did some dungeons this week. So it's not like oh no, I need to run something decent tonight. Otherwise I'll get nothing in my vault. So yeah. Slight change of plans, as far as the rest of the week is concerned. I was going to do Thirsty Suitors tomorrow and then do Warcraft Wednesday. But because Wednesday is Valentine's Day, I think now at this point to me, it makes more sense to do WoW tomorrow and then Thirsty Suitors for Wednesday. Because obviously. And yeah, I don't know. I'm really hoping we can finish it, but we'll see how it goes. Because I do have a dinner date on Wednesday as well, so we'll see. And I would like to look presentable by the time I get there, so we'll see. Elaine, you ran 1 heroic on your mage, so she at least technically has a vault. It's better than nothing, right? And like worst case, you get the consolation prize vault reward. I mean, I have 3 20s and an 18, and the item level difference between those is 3. So I actually have 2 really good vault slots, and usually I only have 1 really good one, and the rest are decent. But also 99% irrelevant at this point in my gearing journey, as it were. So worst case, she disenchants something. Yeah, exactly. Although, frankly, the tokens that you can get instead are probably worth more than that. But it depends. Depends on what you're going for and what you get. So, but yay! Vault stuff. But yeah, so we're just swapping the order of some things this week. But other than that, the plan remains. I can't really claim that it has much to do with reading because I've been wearing this sweater constantly, but I do feel like this is my librarian vibes sweater, so I'm wearing that for reading. Mangoes, you're still doing keys tonight. You need to get Crux some score. Yeah. And like, I could theoretically join you guys, but I would like to get through more of the book because I don't want it to take an actual year to read this book to you guys. So whatever. But yeah, it would technically be an option, but I think I'm just going to brave it out in the Just Chatting category today. And I mean, technically speaking, what I should have done last time was make it Just Chatting and then change it to Warcraft when I actually swapped, but I don't know what that was, man. I don't know. I have no excuses for you. Oh God, why? Sorry, I need to fix this. But my chat module in OBS is just still fucky and it's driving me nuts and I don't know how to fix it. I just keep refreshing it because that like temporarily fixes it, but still. So whatever, it's fine. Everything is great. Yeah, whatever. Should we get into it? I think I'm gonna once again take the dust jacket off just because I feel like I'm gonna fuck it up with it on while I'm reading. And, like, that's kind of what dust jackets are for, but also, you don't want to fuck up your dust jacket, you know? It's nice. So, I did get another book in the mail today. Not going to read it, because we want to read this one first. But just tangent, I finally ordered the first book in a series for which I own the second book. Because someone got it for me as a gift without realizing or not noticing that I did not have the first one / that it was a sequel, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, yay, now I can finally read the sequel book, because this whole time I've been wanting to read the first one again. And by the way, I got this sequel book like 5 years ago. This is how good I am at putting things off for literal years, even though it's like a $15 book. So I'm great at existing, and everyone's like, oh my god, you're so good at not impulsively spending money. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't want to be like me. You don't want to be financially responsible because you're terrified of spending money, and that's the only reason. And then you just don't get things that would dramatically improve your life for 5 years, even though they're like $10. And I don't mean the book, I mean more important things. But yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Technically, I am financially responsible. I do not think that the reasons for that are particularly healthy. I mean, to be fair, some of it is also just that I'm broke, but, you know, that comes and goes. Gin is tasty. She's so cute, you guys. Hi. Mom? Attention? Mother? Please? Yeah. Aww. Child. Okay, anyway. I mean, I don't know. It's not any different than my usual blathering, but considering the entire stream is basically blathering, I could probably just hop right into it. So, anyway, but yeah, for anyone who missed it, wasn't paying attention, or forgot last time we were reading this, we are reading A City on Mars, which is a nonfiction. Sorry, that I am so used to having my headphones on that coming through the speakers like legit jump scared me. Hi Esme, thank you for the resub. But yeah, anyway, we are reading a nonfiction book called A City on Mars. Can we settle space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through? It is a comedic take on why it is perhaps harder, or at least significantly more complicated, to settle space than is often discussed, and that maybe we should do it slower and consider some things in the meanwhile. We have made it through the intro chapter, and that is all. So we're going to get farther today, hopefully. You know, I do know your hot take, Esme, and I don't honestly, it's not even that spicy of a take. You're not alone in that take, and I don't even really fully disagree with you, as we talked about last week. So yeah, you're right. Even though there are valid comments to the contrary / as an addendum, whatever, right? Whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about. He's a baby. Yeah, Lily literally walked into the room right after I hit go. I guess technically right before I switched the camera over. And I heard like little claws ticking coming over, and I was like, oh god, please don't be Pablo. But it wasn't. It was Lily. Yay! She a baby. Okay, so this chapter 1, the first actual chapter, is called A Preamble on Space Myths, which I think is interesting. Watch how many times I trip over my own damn tongue today. Well, it will be many. It will be so many. But anyway, so the quote, I think every chapter has a quote at the start of it. This one I think is really interesting because it's from Andy Weir, who is the author of The Martian and Artemis and Project Hail Mary, which are all very good. I know a lot of people who don't care for Artemis, but I liked it a lot. Esme, thank you for the compliment. I also enjoyed the lipstick. As I said earlier, there is no reason, I just felt like it. Look, I got this kick-ass lipstick on clearance, and I never have an occasion to wear it, so I'm just doing it because I can. But anyway, here's the quote. Idyllic views of the future always seem to come with the hidden assumption that human nature will change. That somehow the flaws of mankind will just melt away amongst the awesomeness of living among the stars. People will abandon mundane flaws like booze and drugs, and also everyone will be super efficient like some kind of environmentalist dream. But that's never been the case as we march forward, so I don't see why it would happen in the future. From Andy Weir, world-famous sci-fi author who also writes really insightful commentary in books about booze in space. You like the earring too? I'm gonna get yours pierced soon. I mean, yeah. I wore these yesterday because they have like little gold lines on them. Technically, all of my plastic spirals did, but the ones that I wore a bunch, it just wore off. So, because it's like paint on plastic, and it's like drizzled on. So they're cheap. It's fine. But yeah, always respect ear piercings, jewelry piercings, etc. I'm definitely more of a tattoo gal than a piercing gal, which is just my own personal comfort, not an aesthetic reason. So it looks like a little shrimp. You aren't, believe it or not, you are not the first person to say that about these particular earrings. I had buried that in the back of my mind, but someone has actually told me that before. Yeah, I don't know if I was gonna say I don't know if I would recommend stretching your ears, but like, it wasn't that bad. Took me 2 or 3 years to get to this point, and then I've just stayed here for the last 12 years-ish. So, yeah. I'm actually kind of contemplating stretching them one size larger at this point. Apparently, I put my sticky note back in, but not in a place where I could see it. But I'm already warm, which is kind of annoying. But whatever, it is what it is. Happy Year of the Dragon! Yeah. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I would say sorry, but I'm not. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I think, like, I always have this moment where I feel weird when I stop talking. And, like, change vibes. And I'm still talking when I'm reading the book, but it's not just a verbal diarrhea, brain train sort of thing. It's somebody else's words. So there's always this weird moment of, like, okay, am I ready to jump into this? And yes, happy Chinese / Lunar New Year, Gong Hei Fa Choi. Chai, rather. It's Gong Si Fa Choi or Gong Hei Fa Chai. Mandarin versus Cantonese, for what it's worth. Word vomit, Mean Girls. I mean, yeah. Yeah, no, that's my whole thing, is just spewing words out of my face hole. So, yeah. But anyway, a preamble on space myths. Let me actually do this. Because switching to a game doesn't involve me not talking anymore, right? Anyway. Outlandish ideas about space settlement often function as a justification for the whole project, typically promising vast wealth, an improved humanity, or an escape from Earth awfulness. Because much of this book hinges on the idea that there's no urgent need to settle space, here we'll try to convince you that most of the pro-settlement arguments are wrong. Some of these arguments may be unfamiliar to you, but all of them have at least some powerful advocates in government, military, or business settings. Bad arguments for space settlement. Argument 1. Space will save humanity from near-term calamity by providing a new home. The idea of a multiplanetary humanity is more resilient to extinction is a common one and is plausible over the very long term. However, over the short term, space settlement won't help with any catastrophe you're imagining right this second. Not global warming, not nuclear war, not overpopulation, probably not even a dinosaur-style asteroid event. Why? In short, because space is so terrible that in order for it to be a better option than Earth, one calamity won't do. An Earth with climate change and nuclear war and, like, zombies and werewolves, this is still a way better place than Mars. Staying alive on Earth requires fire and a pointy stick. Staying alive in space will require all sorts of high-tech gadgets we can barely manufacture on Earth. We'll elaborate on all of this over the course of the book, but the basic deal is that no off-world settlement anytime remotely soon will be able to survive the loss of Earth. Getting any kind of large settlement going will be hard enough, but economic independence may require millions of people. We believe there's a decent case for a Plan B reserve of humanity off-world, but there isn't a good case for trying to do it fast. A commonly made argument for urgency is what's sometimes called the short window argument. The idea that historically, golden ages don't last long, so our current age of space travel might come to an end before we get to Mars. We don't know if that's a good analysis of history, but what we can say is that the current age is simply not golden enough to deliver an independent Mars economy. If you want a Mars that can survive the death of Earth, you'd better make sure Earth doesn't die for a very long time. Wiener Smith verdict? Nah. End of this. As May says, werewolves! I, for one, welcome the werewolf apocalypse. After all, I am the wolf boss. This is true, Esme. You shall rise as queen of the werewolves and, hopefully spare some of us. See, now I'm cold. I hate that when you're in this, like, in-between space. Okay, I'm gonna be stupid. I'm gonna play a little game of fabric redistribution roulette. Gonna lose the socks and put the sweater back on. We'll feast on the 1%. Yeah, that'll do. I don't feel like we need the werewolves for that, but I'm down with it either way. I've been team eat the rich for quite some time now, so that should probably surprise no one who's met me at all. Also, yes, if you missed it, Cranberry Jid tonight. I don't know how I feel about doing like drunk streams on the regular or drinking streams, because like I did that for a while, and that's fine. But like, I don't know if it's a good habit. But it seems like it seems like it fits for these, even though, you know, drinking on a Monday night is weird for most people. But you know, I am a freak and have a freak schedule. So anyway, argument 2. Space settlement will save Earth's environment by relocating industry and population off-world. There are various flavors of this argument, many of which are popular with the rotating space station settlement community, including Jeff Bezos. One version of this idea is that the solar system contains more than enough mass to create rotating space stations that can accommodate an almost endless number of humans in space. This is literally possible in the sense that there is lots of stuff in space, and the stuff could be refashioned into space bases, but we need a sense of proportion here. The Earth of 2022 puts on about 80 million people per year. If saving our ecology requires us to reduce Earth's human population, then we need to launch and house 220,000 volunteers per day just to tread water. A related idea is that space should be zoned for heavy industry, while Earth returns to an unpolluted Edenic state. All the nasty mining and manufacturing can be done elsewhere, with byproducts cleanly disposed of into the vast landfill that is the solar system. And holy fuck, that's a depressing sentence! Then goes Armored Core, but instead of it being about weight distribution, it's about keeping Raz at the right temp. Yeah. Honestly, my temperature regulation is shit, so yeah, I need a whole system of constant rebalancing. Yeah, anyway, as Jeff Bezos says, Earth will be zoned residential and light industrial. Again, this is literally possible, and perhaps as long as you're just thinking in terms of big concepts like pollution and mass, it sounds doable. But the details are where difficulty lives. Consider, for example, cement. It's a major contributor to global warming, so can we make it in space? Technically, most of the components of cement by mass exist on the moon, but they won't be easy to dig up. Construction equipment will need to be built to function in an airless environment at low gravity with equatorial temperature swings from minus 130 C to 120 C. Little things start to loom in this context. Just getting a lubricant that can handle these temperature shifts without degrading is nearly impossible. The same goes for the machines themselves. At extreme cold, some metals can undergo a ductile to brittle transition. Below a certain temperature, metals behave more like stone. However strong they may be, they can't flex and bend. It's speculated that the Titanic sank because its steel hull experienced a ductile to brittle transition before hitting the infamous iceberg. This is a non-trivial problem when you desire to use construction equipment that regularly slams into hard surfaces. Esme adding a tourist to rotate around the world would help too. I mean, maybe. Depends on the context, but that maybe is more feasible. Maybe. We'd have to, I don't know. I wonder if they'll bring anything like that up in the book. We'll have to find out. And that's just one detail of one part of the process, never mind replicating all those factories. How soon can we plausibly get all these problems solved and then scaled to the needs of Earth, which currently requires over 3.5 billion metric tons of cement per year? And does it sound economically competitive with Earth-made cement, even if we could do it? And by the way, what are the rules for dropping 3.5 billion tons of rock on Earth annually? Part of what's supposed to make these ideas work is cheap, plentiful energy thanks to space-based solar power. This is another bad idea. Space-based solar power figures prominently in space settlement proposals for giant rotating space stations. It's also frequently proposed by governments and private space companies as a way to make money while greening the planet. You may have read an article recently about Chinese universities or the European Space Agency or some new startup planning to field this technology in the near future. They probably shouldn't. It's certainly true that there's a whole sun's worth of sunlight in space, unobstructed by annoying Earth features like weather and the atmosphere. Exactly how much more energy you might get per panel depends on exactly what assumptions you're prepared to make, but different estimates expect about an order of magnitude of improvement. That sounds like a lot until you ask yourself what the cost differential will be between a panel in space and a panel in Australia. It's conceivable that in a world where solar panels are incredibly expensive and there's an extreme collapse in the cost of launching objects into space, you might want to maximize your energy per panel by putting them above the atmosphere. But panels are cheap, and even if we assume pretty steep drops in the cost of space launch, the numbers don't add up. This becomes especially clear when you start to think about maintenance. Try to imagine acres upon acres of glass panels in space, regularly pelted by intense radiation and bits of space debris while enduring the extreme heat of perpetual sunlight. They'll have to be repaired and cared for either by astronauts or an army of advanced robots. Solar panels in Australia can be cleaned by a teenager with a squeegee. Okay, so the extreme heat of perpetual sunlight has a footnote, which is a major problem here is also that heat has nowhere to go. Or has to go somewhere, sorry. On Earth, we normally dissipate heat by dumping it into something like air or water. In space, you don't have this, which is why the ISS, for example, has gigantic specialized radiator systems. These, too, will have to be maintained. Sorry, I apologize. I missed a couple of your messages here. It would help with housing. A few space elevators to allow transit between Taurus and surface. Taurus could also be good for hydroponic farming. I mean, I feel like pretty much any farming in space is going to have to be hydroponic, and there's a bunch of different ways to accomplish that. But like, I think ultimately the point you're kind of getting at, or at least what I would translate that to, is that like a near Earth space station would be significantly more functional, or at least more of a, I don't know, like a proof of concept sort of thing. But yeah, like doing something where you could get to it with a space elevator or whatever and ship things that way rather than having to do constant launches and whatever to get stuff up there, I would agree that seems more feasible, at least in the short term. Anyway, when dumping solar power back to Earth, you have another problem. Solar panels on the ground can send their power right into the grid or to batteries. Space-based power has to be beamed to huge receivers on Earth, losing energy en route. But it can't be beamed at too high an intensity lest it endanger birds and planes. Space solar is valuable if you're already in space as a way to generate energy without burning fuel. It may also be valuable on Earth in some very narrow cases, such as beaming energy to military bases where fossil fuel delivery would be dangerous. For more practical uses, you're better off with conventional boring renewables. Cover every rooftop with solar panels, followed by the Sahara Desert, and then if the planet still needs energy, we can talk about space. International airports would be good locations for space elevators. Yeah, that really depends on the airport, but maybe. Also, to be fair, we're honestly not really at the point, like, technology, like, in terms of understanding the technology and how we would conceivably build it and attach it and the physics of it, we are there with space elevators. But in terms of the materials required, we are not there as far as space elevators are concerned. So like, I think space elevators are absolutely a thing that is in humanity's future, but how far into the future, I could not tell you, right? So Elaine, trying to do that in Logan makes you shudder. Yeah, my local international airport would also not be a good candidate for a space elevator. No. Where it's technically international, but yeah. But some of them would certainly work. Although, to be fair, that might actually be a bad idea, just like in terms of how that would affect air travel. But I don't know. I would have to learn more about it before I could definitively say anything on that. And Logan is Boston's airport most of the time. When landing, it looks like you're going to crash into the ocean. Oh, God. Bagel, so space, solar power, and space elevators are the central conceit of Gundam 2000? I don't know. They're mainly built along the equator. And yeah, so yeah, the equator is also a thing too, and a lot of the equator makes sense because there's significantly less of the Earth's motion to deal with at that point. So yeah, that is a point that I had kind of completely forgotten, is that yeah, the equator kind of simplifies a lot of things as far as space elevators are concerned, but that doesn't mean that is the only option. Anyway. Where was I at? Okay. After coating the Sahara in solar panels, we can talk about space. We are skeptical that it will ever be a great financial idea to harvest massive amounts of solar power in space and then use that energy to convert moon dust into cement or steel or industrial chemicals. But even if we believe that this will all happen one day, that one day will not come in time to spare us from any environmental concern of today. Wiener-Smith verdict? Unfortunately, no. Argument 3. Space resources will make us all rich. It's certainly possible, but right now the economics of it aren't looking great. As we'll explore later, no place in space has something like a giant hunk of pure platinum or gold. What space resources do exist are likely to be very expensive to acquire and will remain so even with big improvements in technology. Also, there's a real difference between access to commodities and universal wealth. Consider aluminum. Discovered in 1825, early on it was so valuable that only the wealthy could afford it. Victorian-era jewelry sometimes included aluminum as a precious metal. Today, it's a way to cover lasagna. That's because by the late 19th century, industrial processes had made aluminum incredibly cheap, effectively flooding the market with a former luxury good. This is a great development, and of course aluminum has uncountable valuable applications from the kitchen to airplanes. But the fact that most of us can buy large quantities of a once precious metal doesn't mean we're all millionaires. Aluminium. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to pronounce it the British way? I can't. Elaine, from what you remember of the interview you saw with these people, is they absolutely support space research. They just don't think leaving it as a wild west run by Elon Musk is a great idea. This book kind of lets them learn to walk before we run. You spy with your little eye someone who speaks British English. And yeah, Elaine, that is definitely the gist of where the Wiener-Smiths land on this. It's not that this is all a terrible idea and we should never do it. It's just, hey, maybe we should actually think this through first, and rushing into this headlong, move fast and break things is not the way that you should handle space, let alone space colonization. So, yeah. I feel like my only motivation for saying it aluminium is that's like the scientist speak version. But yeah. Oh, for fuck's sakes. Then I refresh my chat module and it just straight up breaks because only one of Esme's mercy wings actually worked there. Like, why? Twitch? OBS? Why? Whatever. Okay. We're not all millionaires because we can buy aluminum foil. In our experience, people tend to assume raw minerals are the major factor in human well-being. Although they're necessary inputs into our economies, according to a recent report by the World Bank, non-renewable resources, in the sense of valuable stuff found in the ground, make up about 2.5% of Earth's wealth. And a lot of that is fossil fuels, which are not available in space. The really valuable thing for economies is humans and our ideas and technology. You can convince yourself by melting down your phone and assessing the value of the resulting glass, metal, and plastic. I mean, fair. Can't do that much with that. Even if space does produce inexpensive access to all sorts of commodities that make someone rich, there's also no reason to assume anything like an equal distribution of wealth back on Earth. In fact, if you believe there's big money in space, the United States is uniquely poised to go get it, potentially harming the economies of less developed countries dependent on commodities. Yes, okay, I am reading that right. Some readers will care about this more than others, but even if you don't think wealth distribution has much moral significance, and I personally do, it may still have geopolitical significance. As we'll see later, under some conditions, changes in the balance of power among nations can make war more likely. If space really does make some countries especially rich, the consequences don't have to be uniformly good. I told you I was going to stumble all over my own face today. Wiener-Smith verdict, it's complicated, but no, not really. Argument 4, space settlement will end, or at least mitigate, war. I'm just gonna scoot my drink on this side of the book. China needs to be dethroned in what context? Because I could say very much the same thing of the United States. But so, like, that's the thing, is like there are lots of very valid critiques to make of China and the Chinese government in particular, but like pretty much everything that the American government bitches about in regards to China, the US also does. So not all of it, but like a lot more than they would admit. So, and you see, you're saying that it's a fascist country, and like, yes, but is the States not at this point? So again, I'm not saying we should critique China. I just, a lot of the North American fear-mongering about China is very clearly not examining their own position in these things. So, which is not to say that that's where you're landing. That's just me saying that. But anyway, space settlement will end or at least mitigate war. There are a few versions of this one, but we found these 3 pretty common. Space settlement will create more territory, so we'll fight less about territory. Space settlement will make us rich, so we won't want to fight anymore. And space settlement will allow unhappy citizens to just leave for other settlement, which will reduce tension here on Earth. The territory argument is the most silly. Nations don't fight over land, they fight over particular land. You can't solve disputes over Jerusalem or Kashmir or Crimea by promising the parties involved equally large stretches of Antarctica. It'd be like going to a nasty divorce proceeding and trying to solve the custody fight by offering to just grab some other kids. Also, if we're defining land as built structures humans live in, which is the definition you must use for space habitats, well then, on Earth we're creating land all the time. Individual buildings create far more square footage than any space settlement likely to be built anytime soon. Meanwhile, if you personally just want any sort of land, there's plenty. Google it. Small towns all over the developed world are offering free land to people willing to move there instead of big cities. Esme says, valid. Elaine, did anyone else watch the Adam Ruins Everything video? The Adam Ruins Everything guy's video. His name is Adam Conover. But also that's accurate description too. I just stumbled over that for a second because I do watch him, so I knew his name already. But his video with the economist who thinks we aren't in a capitalist economy anymore. He calls our economic system techno-feudalism. I haven't actually watched it, but he is correct. I would co-sign that. Although he is obviously an expert and I am not. Also, I just realized that Alex was doing a heckin' droop. Territory, see Firefly, Wild West in Space, yeah. Thank you, you're just completely blanking on his surname. No worries, like, well, I don't even know how many people actually remember the last name, but, yeah. Yeah, no, honestly, it's a shame that they canceled Adam Ruins Everything. That was really shitty news for him, but he's still making fantastic and very meaningful content, and I appreciate him. I also appreciate just how much he was talking about, like, the writer and screen actor strikes and stuff like that. And just kind of explaining the back end to things to people who don't know. Did Alex have another wild night carousing? I mean, if he did, he did it without me, but maybe he was also celebrating the Lunar New Year. Where was I? Oh yes, you can get free land in the middle of fuck nowhere if you're willing to live in the middle of fuck nowhere. The argument about riches may sound tempting. If humans are rich, why would we fight? But the money makes us all friends argument isn't one that all war scholars buy. Wars start for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with a bunch of people looking at their resource base and saying, hey, this is pretty good. A non-exhaustive list of causes of war includes religious differences, leaders who don't bear the cost of the violence, and misperception about the other party's strengths or intentions. Even if space activity left everyone better off, it wouldn't stop nations from having religious differences, bad leaders, or suspicion about rivals. As for peace, through allowing people to just move between settlements, well, we should consider that most people aren't even allowed to do this between nations on Earth. Space will likely be worse. However you feel about immigrants coming to your country, one thing you probably don't fear is the possibility that they'll breathe too much air. In space, the atmosphere is constructed, as is the ground beneath your feet, and individual settlements will only be rated for certain population sizes. That's not obviously an environment where you'd expect to see open borders. Some advocates note that you can always just create a new place to live in space, but then the argument becomes you can just pull up stakes by creating a 1,000,000-ton space station, which we suspect will not be a live option for most of us. I don't know that I understood that sentence, but I read it, so even if it were, it's still not clearly desirable. As Dr. DeWitt Kilgore, one of the few historiographers of ideas about space, called it a form of celestial white flight. That is, space not as a solution to politics, but as an escape from political realities one group finds uncomfortable. Wienersmith verdict? Nope. See, that's the thing, Esme. Organized religion has caused so many problems, but if you abolish it, people will just find a different thing to rally under and be problematic about. So, like, I don't fully disagree with you, but I don't think, like, it's also problematic to legislate away people's beliefs because of just autonomy and everything. But also, I don't think that trying to solve that problem legally would be particularly useful or at least effective. Add another life to Alex's counter. Yeah, I can do that. He was doing a heckin' droop. Okay, if I could type with my hands, that would be great. Anyway, argument 5. Space exploration is a natural human urge. This is a popular one. The basic idea is that, yeah, maybe there's not a good return on investment reason for space exploration, but if we don't do it, we'll be thwarting our own nature, resulting in widespread human stagnation. The prettiest version of this argument is, of course, from Dr. Carl Sagan. For all its material advantages, the sedentary life has left us edgy, unfulfilled. Even after 400 generations in villages and cities, we haven't forgotten. The open road still softly calls, like a nearly forgotten song of childhood. It's a nice idea, and much better written than any of our Uranus jokes. Also, it can be hard to argue against views like these because it's not always clear what the exact claim is. However, when people do get specific, they tend to point to two things: famous human explorers and the fact that humans have spread around the world. The appeal to famous explorers is moving, but not very convincing. Most of us are not, in fact, famous explorers. Most of us prefer to vacation in places that have pastries and air conditioning, not Mount Everest or the Amazon basin. It's cool that some people are into this stuff, but it's hard to argue that they represent universal human nature. Some people are competitive mayonnaise eaters, but you never hear anyone say they embody deep human truth. And I could say Uranus, but they are clearly leading into the Uranus jokes, so I'm just gonna go with it. Anyway. Plus, if you actually look at the stories of explorers, priority claims seem to be at least as important as exploration. When the Peary expedition said they'd reached the North Pole in 1909, they entered into a public priority fight with Dr. Frederick Cook, who said he'd gotten there first. One person who didn't lay a priority claim was Roald Amundsen. He'd been planning to be the first to the North Pole, and when he heard about Peary's success, what did he do? He immediately switched his expedition to the yet unreached South Pole, even though plenty of the far north remained unexplored. Does it sound like the major goal was always pure curiosity? If exploration is a natural human urge that must be satisfied, why are so many of us happy to sit on our couches, and why are the few actual explorers so concerned specifically with exploration that will make them famous? The second argument, the appeal to humans spreading around the world, is also questionable. Homo sapiens indeed has spread to every continent, but then so have roaches. So have a lot of plants that don't seem very concerned with their cosmic destiny. Humans go to new places all the time for reasons that have nothing to do with an exploratory impulse. Modern mass migration often has to do with warfare, persecution, and starvation. It's plausible that it was the same way in the distant past. Elaine, side note, you heard that NASA recently realized they'd been coloring Neptune wrong for decades. Yeah, I can't remember what it looks like now, but yeah, I need to actually read that article. I did just read the headline and look at the picture and then go, I'll read that later, and then I forgot. But yes, I would very much be interested in that. Esme, you'd rather explore virtual space? Well, then maybe we'll have to do a No Man's Sky stream, and then I can be pissed off about the existence of green stars in No Man's Sky again. Anyway, pretty much identical to Uranus, which is why you thought of it. Okay, fair. Yeah, which is interesting. That's really interesting. So, but yeah, it was just like a chemical composition thing, right? Probably. Again, I didn't read the article. I need to. um, Lastly, if failing to explore causes stagnation, well, where's all the stagnation? Stagnation is an opinion, of course, but the world's surface has been completely mapped since the mid-20th century, and a lot of cool stuff has happened since the 1950s. We have trouble imagining a serious argument that culture has ceased to be creative or that science has ceased to advance. This book you're holding specifically exists because the development of space technology has suddenly accelerated in just the last 10 years, a feat that would be impossible without the decades of rapid advances in computing that came before. Wiener-Smith verdict. Vague, but probably not true. Argument 6. Space will unify us. Probably not. Or, anyway, ask yourself if the last 20 years have been a time of especially great cooperation internationally, and in particular between Russia and the United States. They ought to have been. Since 2001, international crews have been working in harmony in the International Space Station. Yet here in 2022, what we find is, in the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, American astronaut Scott Kelly telling the head of the Russian Space Agency, Dmitry Rogozin, maybe you can find a job at McDonald's if McDonald's still exists in Russia. This was in response to Rogozin sharing a video in which flags of countries that had sanctioned Russia were covered up, despite having been painted on a rocket during more harmonious times. Rogozin fired back, "Get off, you moron!" This was all, of course, on Twitter. Rogozin followed up by saying Kelly probably had dementia from his lengthy stints in orbit. Even the space people aren't unified by space. A more likely guess, and one favored by people who've studied space politics, is that space doesn't unify us. Rather, we do joint space activities when we're already getting along. Other than the International Space Station's construction and maintenance, the major space cooperation events of the 20th century happened in 1975 during the short Cold War détente, and then in the late 1990s after the USSR had collapsed and Russia was no longer considered a threat. Esme, another hot take, space colonization will open the ass crack of doom. Is there a specific definition of the ass crack of doom that you are referring to here? No doubt, space cooperation confers some amount of fellow feeling and gives some segments of our populations practice with working together, but there are almost certainly cheaper ways to achieve the same goal. Consider that the cost of fielding the ISS to date is around $150 billion, which makes it the most expensive human-made object ever built. That's almost enough to send every single Russian, man, woman, and child to Disneyland. For the cost of putting 10 times as many people in space, we could probably get them season tickets and an ice cream. That's a lot of unity. Even supposing space activity caused nations to get along, it's not clear that this would be desirable. Nations often fail to get along for excellent reasons. Part of why there was no major U.S. cooperation with the USSR in space after 1975 is that the Carter administration had concerns about Soviet human rights abuses. Do we want to live in a world where Carter's human rights position changed because some nice people in space got together for a meal and an apple pie of apple pie and borscht? Some international conflicts may really be about the need to stand together and see each other as members of the same human family, but many are down to actual differences in values and goals. Those disputes can and should be solved by conventional politics. Wiener-Smith verdict. Extremely unlikely, and it wouldn't be good even if it were true. Let's send him to Disneyland. Yeah. Okay, none specifically, just vague ass crack of doom. I'm here for it. I'm cool with that. And yes, I do love the idea of Russian-US unity being solved by sending Russian children / everybody to Disneyland. The world we're living in now is because of Reaganomics. I mean, at the very least in the States, but Lord knows it's spread from beyond there too. But yeah, it is truly stunning. Like, in an impressive, if also incredibly depressing way, how much of our lives have been shaped by one dickhead in the 80s. Like, it's genuinely crazy. Like, the man was extremely successful, and the rest of us are still suffering for it long after he's gone. Which is just, like, it's not that weird. It's not like he's the only person that has had that kind of outsized influence on humanity, but it's still fucked. So, Argument 7. Space travel will make us wise. There are different flavors of this argument, but the most famous is philosopher Frank White's notion of the overview effect. White and many other people in the space community believe that the view of Earth from space confers special insights about nature and human oneness. As he says, people who live in space will take for granted philosophical insights that have taken those on Earth thousands of years to formulate. Esme just says foobar. Yeah, truly. So just a note that I feel very certain that the Wienersmiths are going to point out in a paragraph or two, but I'm going to get ahead of it. If seeing the Earth from space dramatically changed us all into philosophers who value human life more deeply and increases our compassion for each other, then Jeff Bezos would not still be Jeff Bezos after going to space. And yet here we are. Just saying. Elaine, you mean as a military strategy against nuclear power, it was brilliant, less so as an economic policy. I mean, yeah. Fair. If so, they don't seem to have been forthcoming with anything terribly earth-shaking. After almost 70 years of spaceflight and over 600 spacefarers, your local library contains no A Critique of Pure Reason in Space, no A Treatise on Human Space Nature. As far as we can tell, most of the philosophizing... I'm sorry. I did not mean to smash onto the microphone. I apologize. As he says, in fact, Bezos saw the opportunity of going to space to flash his dick to a flight attendant. Did he seriously do that? Like, I don't find that hard to believe, but I hadn't heard that. That's disgusting and shameful and pathetic. Ugh. Yeah, no, that's really upsetting. That's really upsetting. Again, not surprising, but very upsetting. But yeah, again, if space had the power to magically change us all, there would be... Him and Richard Branson would have had like a heart-to-heart and become very different people. Anyway. Oh, I gotta read that last sentence. As far as we can tell, most of the philosophizing by spacefarers could fit nicely on a Hallmark card. The standard observations are that the Earth is beautiful and fragile and that you don't see borders up there. The latter claim, by the way, isn't even true. We were told by one cosmonaut that you can see the India-Pakistan border as well as the border between North and South Korea. In any case, supposing you really couldn't see those borders from space, would that be wisdom? We believe an insightful person ought to see that there's a border between the Koreas. The people trapped on one side certainly do. Another serious problem for this theory is that there's no good evidence for it. A few papers have been written with incredibly leading surveys asking astronauts whether time in orbit had increased their interest in things like the environment and human interconnectedness. As if astronauts already aren't, like, the best of us, right? Like, maybe not literally all of them, but pretty fucking close. Bezos and Branson should have a gay moment together. And then they would spend the next 3 years saying no homo every time they saw each other. Anyway. One paper included a free-form questionnaire in which several astronauts noted that they were not given the option to declare reduced or unchanged interest in these things. That's not to say going to space is dull. No doubt it's a meaningful, transcendent experience. But other transcendent experiences are available too, generally at a lower fee. One attempt to measure the overview effect found that if it exists, the effect is about in line with that experienced by new moms. We don't plan to make fun of new moms and alienate our audience this early in the book, but can we just agree that if every new mom got the insights of philosophers and sages, Facebook would be substantially more pleasant? Also, making new moms is cheaper and easier than making new astronauts. Nobody becomes an astronaut by accident. Jesus Christ. Oh God. Facebook would be a more pleasant place. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. Astronauts at least have to be good at acting the part of the best. Exactly. And I mean, maybe earlier on, like, I don't know. The initial space programs were super sexist, and to be honest, in some ways we are still really lacking in that front, and things like that. But yeah, like, astronauts, generally speaking, are the best of us, and if even they are not magically converted into wise, enlightened sages, and I mean, some of them probably are, but maybe a lot of them that were from the start, right? But yeah, whatever. Space is fantastic. Seeing the Earth from that view is life-changing, but it's not magical, and it will not fix us. Alien moms. Mars needs moms, yes. Fiction, but have I read Calculating Stars? Oh, have I? I don't think so. I've definitely heard the title before, and I'm just struggling to remember any details about it. Deliver us, Mom! Esme. I like it. But also, nobody becomes an astronaut by accident is fucking savage. I love it. Oh, God. Most damning to the theory is the fact that, while there have only been about 600 people in space, there are about 6,000 stories of astronauts behaving badly. Okay, here we go. Yeah, they're not all perfect. That's a fact. Alcoholism, adultery, flying planes while on drugs, lying to medical staff. Oh, that whole flying planes while on drugs. Pilots will hide all sorts of shit to keep flying. Lying to medical staff, also that part. Denying climate change, promoting pseudoscience, fighting publicly with other astronauts, and the time an astronaut drove across the country in order to kidnap her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. Jesus! I didn't know about that! The ex was also an astronaut and had arguably been stringing her along. Least sagely of all, perhaps, was the time Valentina Tereshkova, beloved first woman in space, proposed a constitutional amendment in the Russian Duma granting Vladimir Putin the option of 2 additional terms as president. She was later sanctioned by the US government in response to her support for Russia's annexation of Ukraine and the sham referendums used to justify it. Perhaps when viewed from space, we are all equal, but some of us remain more equal than others. Wiener-Smith verdict? Nope. Argument 8. Creating nations in space will reinvigorate our homogenized, bureaucratic, and generally wussified Earth culture. As my shitty astronauts try murderous astronauts, see Black Mirror. So I actually haven't watched the most recent season of Black Mirror. I have kind of been meaning to, but I keep forgetting. I've heard that, honestly, I think as has been the case for most of Black Mirror, that there are very good episodes and then there are stinkers. So I guess we'll find out. I think there's only 4 of them in this season. Elaine, it's a counterfactual history where Dewey does beat Eisenhower, followed by a major meteor strike, and because the goal of the space program in the 50s becomes colonization, it has to include women. Okay, see, that's really interesting. Have I read that? Because that's very similar to the plot of the Lady Astronaut of Mars books. And that might be the first book in the series? Yes. Okay, yes. No, that is exactly what it is. I forgot the name of the first book, but yeah, I've read the whole series, and that's why it's so familiar. But it's a very interesting book. I liked it a lot. I like the whole series a lot. I will say that I have some critiques about the main character being kind of annoying and not the way that the racism is handled is both good and bad. There's a lot of the white main character not realizing that she's contributing to the problem and then learning from it and being very sorry and trying to do better. But I would say that she doesn't really do a good job of learning from it most of the time. But it is a complicated issue, especially in the context of the 50s to 70s. So it's handled reasonably well, but the main character, I don't even think it's the author. I just think it's the main character that's kind of annoying about it. So, but yeah, I don't know why I didn't remember that was the name of the first one, but yeah, that it is a good book, and I do recommend it. Esme, this last season of Black Mirror, every episode gets progressively darker. I mean, it's not as if Black Mirror wasn't already super dark, but fair. Okay. Argument 8. Creating nations in space will reinvigorate our homogenized, bureaucratic, and generally wussified Earth culture. Which sounds like a tech bro argument. It's also the name of your personal WoW guild. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Whether Earth is becoming more homogenized is a subject of intense debate among sociologists. Globalization does affect small local cultures, but it also results in cultural hybridization, which makes new stuff. Whether this counts as a net loss is a matter of perspective, but perhaps the most quantifiable version of the homogenization argument is the loss of rare languages around the world. This is indeed happening, but we talked to linguists about the question, and they were skeptical of the idea that going to space would change anything. To get new languages, you need genuine long-term separation. Complete separation from Earth anytime soon will neither be neither possible nor desirable. If you want a new language, stick people on a lonely island without internet for a few centuries. Mars is going to have Netflix. That's a good point. That I hadn't thought about, but that's a good point. For some, it's not about homogenization, but wussification. Many American space advocates favor a version of what scholars call the Turner thesis or the frontier thesis. Footnote. We've been told by European friends that this is a US quirk, but we did find at least 2 European sources using this argument as well. The claim is that the United States became dynamic, democratic, ruggedly individualistic, and generally awesome due to a long-standing frontier culture. Sometimes this is a simple rhetorical flourish about space as a place of newness and adventure, but often the frontier is seen as something more, as sort of a process of social resurrection. In this vision, space settlers will forge a hard, serious, creative civilization, and that borderland society will show Earth people a tougher and more democratic mode of life, just as the American West purportedly did for the United States. Can you tell that I am reading this in my obnoxious propaganda bullshit voice? Because, I mean, not that I think the Weidersmiths are going to agree with this, but I'm just like, ugh. The problem here is that this once popular theory is now rejected by pretty much all mainstream historians as a misleading oversimplification. Yeah, exactly, as in colonization, for fuck's sakes. And you're right, Mars will also have Disney+. Okay, so the footnote for that is, by academic standards, the overturn was fairly brutal. Here's an excerpt from a 1987 paper by Yale historian Dr. William Cronin, who is notable for his attempt to highlight the positive aspects of Turner's work. After all the articles and books and dissertations, what could possibly justify yet another excursion on the blood-drenched field of the frontier thesis? In the half-century since Turner's death, his reputation has been subjected to a series of attacks which has left little of his argument intact. I mean, yeah, because it's a bad argument. But yeah, the Wild West did, also the rugged individualism thing is not actually good. It's not good. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of it. There are still a ton of people who think that it's a good thing, but it's not. It's not good to be obsessed with individualism and fending for yourself and never owing anyone anything else. Like, that's just not how society fucking works. Stop it. It is, like, it has been a huge source of polarization and problems and violence and hatred spreading, and it's bad, and I will never, ever feel differently than that. Except maybe to feel more radically, that I could see. Sorry. Esme, you're still stewing over what America has done to the natives here before us. Yeah, and I mean, you should still be stewing. I'm still stewing. Whether it's America or Canada, we did fucked up shit, and that's not a good thing. And even the handful of good things that came out of that period of time don't justify any of that. So, sorry, no. Anyway, even if it were true, if you read the original literature the Turner thesis relies on the idea that US settlers had cheap land, isolation from non-frontier areas, and ominously, the need to organize to seize land from the native population. Space is expensive, will have internet, and thankfully lacks a local population to exploit and murder. As with the issue of homogenization, even if the theory is true, it's not at all clear that a Mars base is the way forward. A more generalized version of this frontier argument says that the harsh world of space and the need for robotics will result in a vast increase in creativity. Again, this is hard to measure and debated by scholars, but there are reasons to be skeptical that space is the optimal solution. To illustrate why, consider an idea that we call the necrosphere. In contrast with the biosphere, the necrosphere is a built structure on Earth. Inside it, the ground is poison. There is no air, and cascades of radiation are fired at the inhabitants on a perpetual basis. And there's an illustration that says, nerds in, science out. To the necrosphere. Elaine, somehow to you, the deliberate spreading of smallpox to native peoples was one of the most horrific. And, like, I kind of agree. Not to downplay the horrific nature of everything else that happened, but yeah, it was like it's kind of morally similar to like a drone strike. It's a way to like distance yourself from the atrocities you're committing. But it's also a horrible way to die, and just no, it's horrific. It's genuinely, intensely, deeply horrific and upsetting. So yeah, I agree with you. Okay, Necrosphere dumbing down to society, idiocracy. I don't know if that's what we're getting at, but yeah. um, why did we build it? In the sure knowledge that we can stick engineers inside who, due to the harsh environment combined with their need to not die, will spew forth valuable ideas like a spigot spews forth pressurized water. If this sort of thing seems implausible to you, you should ask yourself why anyone would expect a Mars base to generate all these supposed benefits. You should also ask yourself why it is that so many innovations on Earth come not from anarchic wastelands, but from cities where engineers' main hardship is $8 espressos. In any case, the goal of is creating off-world nations. If the goal is creating off-world nations, it's worth noting that you're simply not allowed to under international law. Given how dependent on Earth any future space settlement will be, this is a non-trivial impediment. Wiener-Smith verdict. Vague, but probably not. There are other arguments, but the ones above are those we've most frequently encountered. You should note, however, that we have not made any arguments that people shouldn't settle space, just that a lot of the purported benefits are implausible. That leads us to our last question here. Okay, fine. Is there any good case for space? Sorta. We think there are two arguments that at least don't rely on implausible economics or incorrect sociology. They share a problem, but it's a speculative problem about the future. And okay, so we'll get to those. In 10 years, that $8 espresso will cost $32. I mean, probably, yes. But yeah, so, like, it's interesting about the whole creativity with space and robotics and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you want to know how to give humans more time and space to be creative beings and come up with innovative solutions and new ideas? Universal basic income. Feeding everybody. Housing everybody, general human welfare. Because you know what? You know how many minds, brilliant minds that this world could have had, did that person not spend their entire life simply trying to feed themselves? Like, you don't fucking need to go to space. You just need to take care of people so that they're not spending all of their time and creative energy just simply trying to survive. That is truly, if all you actually care about is human creativity, that's the way to accomplish it, is vast, oh god, what's the word I'm looking for? Shit. Not sociology, that's not what I'm looking for. It's the thing that socialism. It's vast socialism and humans supporting and caring for each other so that that's the basics of survival are simply a human right that is provided to everyone. UBI and free healthware equals utopia as far as you're concerned. Yeah. Like, obviously it's not going to solve every single problem, but yeah, if you want people to be free to innovate, that's how you do it. If you want people to, like, pursue their dreams and get into, like, things that require years of schooling that people can't afford to do because then they wouldn't be working and then their family would starve, like, yeah, people would be free to pursue all of those things if we were not all just desperately trying to scrape by to survive. And that has absolutely nothing to do with space. As much as I love space and want to know more, like, see, that's the thing, is, like, I'm relatively pro Moonbase, but I'm also very pro doing it right, the way that this book is suggesting. And I love space, and I want to know more, and I'm all here for funding kick-ass telescopes, etc., so that we can learn more and everything. But no, I do not think that living in space is going to solve all of our problems, and I never will. Esme, the need to work is essentially indentured servitude. I mean, yeah, basically, it's like global level extortion. Elaine, funny how the smartest people always seem to come from certain classes. Exactly. It is. And a lot of it is just because children who haven't had enough to eat don't learn as well and can't learn as well. And that's not because they're dumb. It's because they're fucking starving. And that's not okay. It's just not. Oh god, I'm gonna get real fucking ranty as we read this book, aren't I? Which is okay. That's kind of what the subject matter encourages. Apparently, okay, we've gotten to enough booze and yelling that I am warm again. So we'll see if I need to go back and forth with this sweater a third time. Banquos re Bezos and his philosophy of space colonization. Bezos gets a lot of his philosophy and goals for space from a book called The High Frontier by Gerald K. O'Neill, which I think they mentioned in the last chapter. It essentially lays out so much of the meritocracy in Earth as a zoo for the rich nonsense that Bezos and people like him believe. Yeah, fully. For sure. Exactly. They genuinely don't see the rest of us as human. They simply see us as a means to an end. That's it. Why would you care about the welfare of your fucking workhorse animals when you can just get another one for basically zero effort? Which is still disgusting. I'm still very much on a, treat your fucking animals right kind of front. Even if they refuse to never see us as anything other than cattle, you should still treat your cattle right. But obviously that is not how a lot of people function. So, but yeah, I understand where they're coming from, but that doesn't make it less disgusting. Okay. I need to drink more. Not because booze, but because dry mouth. Okay, so these are the potentially good arguments, and there are two of them, I think. Argument 1, the Cathedral of Survival. There are very few philosophers willing to argue against human life on net. In their defense, though, they have some of the best book titles. Including Every Cradle is a Grave and Better Never to Have Been. However, most of us would like this whole human existence thing to keep muddling along. If you look at long surviving species on Earth, they tend to have a few factors in common. Large populations, genetic diversity, wide geographic spread. Having a Mars settlement with enough people and habitat that it could survive an earthly calamity seems to fit the bill. It will not save us from climate change or from any of the other likely ways to destroy ourselves in the near term, but it may still be a worthwhile long-term endeavor. As with the cathedrals of Earth, those of us who cast the first few bricks may not be around to see the spire placed on top, but we might nevertheless want to start building. Exactly what that might enjoin us to do right this second is trickier, but if we agree we ought to build this thing for our grandkids, taking the first steps right now seems wise. And I do... Fine, I'll drink actual water as my G's. Elaine, an interesting trivia fact, cows that have names and not just numbers individually produce more milk. And see, that's the thing too, is I didn't even necessarily intend to get into that, but yeah, even if we're talking the meat after an animal is slaughtered, the products that come from animals are better and more plentiful if we treat animals with dignity and respect. And obviously that doesn't fucking fit the bottom line in terms of factory farming, but it is absolutely a fact, and we should care about that. Esme, if you ever own a cow, you're gonna name it Jeff Bezos. And then have an excellent time eating it. Look, I grew up on or near farms. I'm very circle of life about these things. I do know a family that yes, yeah. They had 9 daughters or something insane like that, and they had a cattle farm or a dairy farm or whatever, and they would sometimes eat the cows. But yeah, the girls would name the cows, and then they would and they were fairly religious too, but then they would butcher a cow, and when they were eating it, they would stop to say thank you to Bessie or whatever, right? And so a lot of people are appalled by the idea of naming an animal and then eating it, but I think that it's good in a lot of ways because it makes you respect what went into your food. It makes you understand what was sacrificed so that you could continue to sustain yourself, right? And I think that that's an important thing to do. I remember, and it wasn't necessarily fair of me that at the time I kind of rolled my eyes, but love your cow and eat it too. Exactly. But I remember watching this BuzzFeed video years ago of like city kids who had like never even considered where their food came from. They went out to a farm and they like killed a chicken to just sort of understand all of this, and they were like extremely distressed, and I get it. I don't want to personally kill the animals that I eat either, but like I also don't shy away from the reality of it, because you can't. You have to face that head on, in my opinion. Otherwise you're disrespecting the contribution of that animal. I guess. I think it's really important for us to understand where our food comes from and what is required to make that happen. And if we all knew how all of this worked and how it happened, I think that a lot fewer people would be okay with factory farms. Straight up, right? Like, the fact that there are so many people that just aren't worried about that and aren't bothered by that because they simply never think about it is fascinating to me, in sort of an upsetting way, but not always. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that I have, but I would always prefer to not eat factory farmed meat. And I do try to buy, when I do buy meat, I try to buy local meat that I know was ethically sourced, right? And that's very hard to do in the world that we live in. But it is a worthwhile endeavor to try, in my opinion. So yeah. Elaine, you know someone who goes crossbow hunting for meat to feed his family. You absolutely respect that. Not so much millionaires who pay to kill a rhino. And Esme says, millionaires that kill rhinos should be hunted too. Agreed. And yeah, like if you're hunting for subsistence, that's respectable. I have no problem with that. Hunting in itself is not a bad or evil or tragic thing. It is simply a thing that humans have always done. And as long as that animal is not going to waste and is not being made to suffer, then I have absolutely no problems with that. So, yeah. Esme, living in the desert eating ethically killed food is nearly impossible. Absolutely. Yeah, like, to be fair, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. I do not judge anyone for not being able to make those choices, whether it's financial or even just availability. So, like, this is not an individual judgment sort of situation. Absolutely not at all. This is a regulation and public perception and governmental legislative kind of issue, right? But I do think that it would help for more people to be aware of the consequences of not knowing these things, of not caring and thinking about it, right? So, yeah, but again, like, seriously, absolutely no judgment. Personally, I don't think that everyone should be a vegan. I absolutely am fully a person that will say that we should all start, or, well, not all, we should eat bugs. We should eat crickets. We should eat crickets instead of beef. If we can. But that doesn't mean that I think we should never, literally never, absolutely no one can ever eat beef again. It doesn't mean I think that people who have sensitivities or allergies shouldn't be allowed to eat meat. Like, everything in moderation, everything reasonably speaking. But in terms of just, like, energy efficient yeah. Crickets, everybody. I will go on the bugs as food rant a different day. I may have already done that on this channel at some point, but another time, I promise. I will make notes and I will rant at you. Like, okay, but brief aside before I catch up on your comments here. The fact that the whole twist in the Snowpiercer movie, like the horror, was them going farther up the train and finding out that their gross Jell-O food bricks were actually bugs, and everyone was like disgusted and horrified and be like, we can't handle this revolution. Are you kidding me? Really? That's all that it takes? Because, like, the fact that it's a gross Jell-O brick to me would be more upsetting than the fact that the gross Jell-O brick is made out of bugs. But see, that's the thing, Esme. Yeah, okay. Yes, I'm scrolling back first, and then we'll get into it more. As when you tried to go vegan wasn't for you, you'll stick with being an omnivore. Totally. Not everyone can be a vegan for 100 different reasons. Even if it's just preference, that's totally okay. I am not a vegan. I am not judging anyone for their food choices, unless they're the kind of person that's like, I am deliberately going to buy extra meat that I end up throwing out to say fuck you to vegans. Elaine, another one of those things. Feeding a cow grass for just a week before slaughtering them reduces the amount of E. coli in their gut by something like 80%. Yep. And so the interesting thing about cows is there are a couple types of seaweeds, notably a red seaweed, that dramatically reduce the methane output of livestock animals. But instead at least in the States, they are fed nothing but cornmeal. And there is an actual methane pollution problem associated with that, which is wild. And Esme is saying cockroaches as food, hard pass to the bugs. Elaine, you'll do the bugs as food as long as you give it to me in some sort of flavored protein bar. You don't want to see the legs. And same. Big same. Like, I also don't want to just, like, pick up a bug and eat it. So, like, to be clear, I am not asking or suggesting that anyone does that, but, like, cricket flour is a real thing. We could grind them up and make burger patties, and that would be fine with me. But also, not everybody needs to do it. I just think that there needs to be a cultural shift towards that sort of sustainable sources of food and protein, and I think that a lot more of us than think we would be okay with it as long as it was done correctly and presented in a certain way, right? Like, I think a significant amount of people whose initial gut reaction is that's disgusting and horrifying and never in a million years, I think there are a lot of those people that if given time, a chance, and a different perspective would be totally okay with it, basically. Esme says vegans on their high horse about other people needing to be vegan can GTFO. Yeah, exactly. Rat burger demolition. Yeah, but yeah, there are just a lot more sustainable ways to feed ourselves that a lot of people are just not okay with on a conceptual level off the jump that I think that aren't considering all of the options, right? But yeah, it never goes well when I bring up the bugs as food thing. There is always someone who's like, fuck you, that's disgusting, I hate you, I would never. Every time. So, Elaine, you will say, despite the reputation of vegans, you've seen far more people trying to force meat on vegans and vegetarians than I have obnoxious vegans. In IRL, that is. You know, the obnoxious vegans are on YouTube. Yes. And I will completely agree with that. I obviously have met obnoxious vegans, but there are also an absurd amount of people that as soon as someone says they're vegan will, like, legitimately try to sneak meat into their food and stuff. And that is, like, actual assault. Don't fucking do that. It is someone else's life, and as long as they aren't being a dick to you about it, you have no right to have any say in how they live their life, as long as they are not harming others. Like, vegans who try to make their cats vegans, I have serious beef with, because cats are not fucking vegans. They're obligate carnivores. You need to feed them, like, animal proteins. This is non-negotiable. But, like, yeah, no, just leave people the fuck alone on both sides of the spectrum. And like, if someone's been vegan long enough, giving them meat, especially against their knowledge, is straight up poisoning. Don't fucking do that. But yeah, it's just not okay to step on anyone's choices in that way, regardless of which side of the meat argument you are on. So yeah, Esme, one day you'll have a mouse as a pet. I love mice. In the 3 weeks, oh no, this was before. So I lived in my parents' basement for like 14 months while my house was being built back in the day. And I would go out and smoke weed in the shed because it was, the shed. And there was a little family of mice in there. And it was adorable. And like there were actual babies and they were teeny and very cute. And I gave them food. I do not think my parents appreciated this, but I fed the mice. They weren't in the house. It's fine. Okay. So the end of this sentence is basically saying, like, it's the cathedral theory where you'll start building something even though you won't see it come to fruition yourself. And I think that that is the opposite of rugged individualism. And I think it is admirable as fuck. And that, yeah, there is nothing more selfless you can do than to devote yourself to a project you will never see the benefits from because you know that it will help others. And we need more of that, basically. So, Elaine, you saw this whole article about how entitled vegans are, and the example is that someone gave a restaurant a bad review when she called the restaurant in advance to make sure if they could accommodate her diet, and they said they could, and then harassed her and insulted her when she came. Yeah, so entitled to think the restaurant should have just said no instead if they weren't going to accommodate her. Yeah, no, that's, like, why? Like, you just wanted to take the opportunity to shit on someone who has different views than you? And I think a lot of it comes down to some meat eaters being absolutely unwilling to change the way that they live their lives, which is okay. But they also know that there are environmental and health, etc. impacts to the meat that they eat, and they don't want to face that reality. And vegans telling them about those things makes them feel bad, and they don't want to deal with it, so they lash out. Which is just petty and not good for anyone. But also, again, vegans don't be dicks. Meat eaters don't be dicks. Just don't be dicks. It's that simple. Esme, you're totally fine with Impossible meat. Yeah, like, I don't know if I've ever had Impossible. I have had Beyond Burgers, and I just don't like them, but I'm not, like, opposed to it. But there is also some concerns in terms of, like, lab meat, not being better environmentally speaking, which really defeats the purpose if you ask me. So there's a middle ground there, right? But yeah, like, there's ways to do that. I've had plant-based meat before, and, like, it's funny, people tell me I'm losing my mind because vegetarian, not vegan, but vegetarian ground meat here is legitimately cheaper than beef, and I've had Americans be like, you're full of shit. All of that stuff is always more expensive than beef. And I'm like, do you live next to a bunch of fucking cattle farms? Because I'm not lying. Meat is expensive here. So I have legitimately gone through periods of my life where that was all I ate, meat-wise, because it was cheaper. And I don't have to cook it. So, yeah. Esme, you had a bean meat burger once, wasn't bad. Yeah, bean burgers I've had too. I can, holy baby, it was impossible, her face. She's so cute. Anyway, let's go back to reading the book instead of ranting. We'll rant again. Don't worry. Oh, well, am I too loud for you? She's been. Yeah. Oh, Biggie on. Oh, I love you. Okay, go back to sleep. Yes, book. Okay. So the whole cathedral of survival thing, the Weinersmith verdict is a good argument over the long term, assuming you like humans. Argument 2, the hot tub argument. When you want to buy a hot tub, nobody says, it is the destiny of man to put his butt in bubbly hot water. Nobody tries to convince you that a hot tubless humanity is bound to stagnate. Nobody tells you that the proliferation of toasty warm outdoor bathtubs will end human conflict. It's just that you want a hot tub and someone is selling it and nobody has any right to stop you. This is not the most noble or uplifting argument for any particular action, but then we suspect appeals to human nobility tend to co-occur with appeals for taxpayer money. If the reason for going to space is not philosophical or even just about return on investment, well, that's okay. Because it's awesome is still a perfectly serviceable argument. Weinersmith verdict. Like Weinersmiths in a hot tub. Not very attractive, but entirely possible. And I do think that that is one of the best arguments here, too, is just because it's fucking awesome. If you get in a tub, you can make your own bubbly water. There you go. It's a jacuzzi. What? Okay. I don't want to bother her because then she's going to expect more bothering. The fly in the space ointment. The potential snag to both of these arguments is the question of whether going to space might put species survival at greater risk. Let's say space increases the risk of species annihilating war or terrorism. In that case, we've now built a survival cathedral that has the potential to topple onto all of us. If our justification for space settlement is long-term species survival, we need to be reasonably confident that settlement actually increases our chances. In the case of the hot tub argument, you can visualize a spectrum running from hot tubs to nuclear weapons. For most of us, hot tub acquisition does not put anyone else in danger. Maybe someone who accidentally peeks over the fence, but that's their problem. Nuclear weapons acquisition is different. Your possession of a nuclear-tipped intercontinental ballistic missile is not a personal matter because I might get blown up. That gives me a right to prohibit you from having it. Note that this is true even if you are a very nice person and have no plans to actually use the nuke in your garage. The question then is whether a space settlement is closer to the hot tub or the nuke. Is it a free choice for individuals or a case in which strict regulation is needed? We consider these two arguments to be the strongest arguments for settlement, but we've reluctantly become convinced that the fly in the ointment is more like an elephant. We'll spend the rest of the book on what space is like and the regulations that govern it, after which we'll return to these arguments and assess them in light of all that information. Esme, which breed of cat will be the first in space? Good question. Probably not this delicate little princess. Slurp, slurp. Hi. Yeah? Oh, baby. Okay, we gotta do more slurping. Scottish fold, the low gravity might help their pain. Oh, babies, yeah. Oh, Lily. Yeah. Such a pretty, happy baby. Who does a slurp, slurp? Yeah. Okay, go back to sleep. I got shit to do. A brief note on language and the profound chauvinism of the authors. The two words most commonly used to indicate a place in space humans intend to live permanently are colony and settlement. A debate that we can trace back to at least the 1970s concerns which of these terms carries less offensive historical baggage. A few alternatives have been suggested, but to be honest, they're not great. The Beyond Earth Institute, for example, favors the clunkily septisyllabic communities beyond Earth. A shorter option is space outposts. But it doesn't capture the idea that one day people will have families, children, and institutions. Meanwhile, space cities sound substantially more grand than anything we expect to exist anytime soon, and space villages sounds like it involves peasants in burlap pressure suits with horse-drawn Mars rovers. The prolific is not always poetic. Isaac Asimov once suggested our favorite option, SPOAM. Try saying it. SPOAM. Look, you're already smiling. SPOAM is short for Space Home, and while it certainly lacks historical baggage, it also sounds like an off-brand bar soap or a build-up a surgeon has to extract from your kidneys. We'll be using settlement because frankly it is the preferred word right this second among space geeks. If SPOAM creeps in from time to time, we apologize. A bi-curious Mars rover. And yes, stop breeding animals just because they're cute, without consideration for their well-being. I agree. There's a footnote here, but where was the footnote, little star? Okay, the footnote is for SPOAM. Impressively, SPOAM isn't even the most awkward term. That honor goes to a term proposed by Dr. David Criswell in a 1985 book chapter, The Unpronounceable SOHM. It's S''home, by the way, as a contraction of space and home. David Criswell, the solar system industrialization, implications for interstellar migrations. In interstellar migration and the human experience. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's just a footnote. Or, no, not a... Attribution. That's not the word I'm looking for, but reference? That's also not the word. Whatever. Citation. Jesus. There we go. Finally, and with some trepidation, we wish to note that in some places the book may be America-centric. Your authors are both American. We like drip coffee, we like bad cheese, and when we see overseas tourist attractions, we clap inappropriately. This is regrettable, but can't be changed. We have therefore done our best to talk to non-American readers and scholars and listen to their views, especially when they contradict ours. That said, one thing we want to emphasize is that when it comes to space, for better or worse, some level of Americocentrism is justified. While the United States is no longer the only major power on Earth, it remains the overwhelming player in space. The US government spends far more on space than any other, and the revolutionary new space launch companies are all US based. If from time to time we talk about myths of the American frontier or legal theories the United States is apt to favor, it's because those are the myths of the current hegemonic power in space. In 1976, as part of the Bogota Declaration, 8 equatorial nations claimed territorial rights to geostationary orbit, which by the nature of orbital mechanics is perpetually over their heads. Geostationary orbit is valuable, and the idea was that these less developed nations ought to get paid rent by anyone using their space. But although to this day the Colombian Constitution asserts special rights to a slice of that orbit, the claim has largely been ignored by the international community. If the same claim had been made by the country with the most powerful military in history and the most advanced space launch technology, we suspect the newly installed "for rent" sign would have been taken a bit more seriously. In a room full of animals, the gorilla may not be the wisest, but you probably want to know what's on its mind. Is she going blink blink? Or is that me? My baby. Hi. She's just like, Mommy, I'm right here. Please pay attention to me, Mom. Mom. Oh, how the fuck is it 20 to 9 already? We got through one chapter. We could probably make it to 9:30 and finish another chapter, right? Baby. It's been almost 2 hours already. Although we have gotten sidetracked multiple times. Which, to be fair, is the whole point / fun of doing this here. So, yeah. Okay, we are now officially at part 1. Both of those chapters that we've read so far are essentially preamble. It's not your fault, Esme. It's all good and I've been enjoying the tangents. I just don't really want to stop in the middle of a chapter either, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, so this is actually a little preamble to the next chapter, because we are technically on chapter 2. But this is the summary of part 1. So part 1, caring for the spacefaring. If you are a space settler and the goal is to have a large population in space, one of the best things you can do is not die. Or if you're planning to die, don't do it right away. If you can swing it, have a few kids, raise them to reproductive age, then go gentle into that good night. We don't know how to do this. Not really, anyway. Humans have been in space for over 60 years now, and we do know plenty about what astronauts experience, but astronauts aren't normal people. To be frank, they're better than us. Although this is changing a little as the era of space tourism permits the schlubby among us to reach orbit, the average astronaut is someone who combines deep specialist skills with the ability to pass a battery of physical and mental tests that most of us would bail on in a few days. Many of the early spacefarers were ultra-skilled test pilots, but even when space agencies opened up a little, the resumes remained intimidating. Dr. Sally Ride wrapped up a PhD in physics from Stanford before becoming an astronaut, and during her flight training was said by a Okay, bye. She just like murdered Alex and then bailed. Lily honestly is like the #1 cause of Alex deaths. I swear to God. But yeah, bye Lily. We'll see if she comes back. She's probably just mad at me for ignoring her. Anyway. And during her flight training, it was said by a Navy test pilot, John McBride, to be the best student I ever had. She was 27 when selected. While Dr. Rhea Seddon was awaiting her turn on the space shuttle, she combined astronaut training with continuing her work as a surgeon, and in her spare time raised several children. Feel bad about yourself? These are normal stats for an astronaut. That's great for mission success, but not great if we want to know what space medicine will be like for more average people in large space settlements. Combine this with the fact that literally no one has been to space for longer than 437 days in a row, and the total time the Apollo mission spent in the moon's 1/6 Earth gravity is just under 2 weeks, and it becomes very clear how little we know about the most pertinent question for space settlement. Can regular people flourish for long periods off-world? Here, we want to get a much firmer grip on what is known and what isn't. Many of the most likely problems might easily be surmounted with near-term technology, or just a boatload of money. Others may pose intimidating long-term barriers to any kind of permanent space settlement. Yeah, astrosurgeon indeed. Rip Alex, yeah. But yeah, apparently Rhea Seddon is incredible, but yeah, like all astronauts are in fact better than us. Maybe not behaviorally in all cases, but like in terms of their resume, yeah. Okay, Chapter 2, Suffocation, Bone Loss, and Flying Pigs, the Science of Space Physiology. The Pre-Human Space Age. A human is, to a first approximation, a pillar of liquid about 2 meters high in which are suspended various moist, jiggly biological systems. Digestion, waste storage, sense of balance, the movement of blood. All of these systems evolved in an environment where a 6 billion trillion ton sphere called the Earth sat at the pillar's foot. So let's say it's April 12th, 1961. You're Yuri Gagarin, about to do this brand new thing where you ride the warhead part of a missile into orbit. Why are you confident that your stomach won't turn inside out? That blood will continue to supply oxygen to your brain? That your lungs and liver and kidneys will all work just fine floating around inside your body cavity? For one thing, you're not the first Voyager to make this trip. Not even the first ape. The US and USSR both studied the effects of space on non-human life for over a decade before Gagarin went up. Soviet engineers favored dogs for flight. This sentence goes on to the next page, so I'm just going to read the footnote that is attached to being confident that your stomach won't turn inside out. Wally Schirra, the only astronaut to fly on all of the first 3 U.S. human spaceflight programs, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, claimed in his biography that he thought these sorts of fears were silly because in his Air Force days, he'd once observed a base commander drinking a martini while standing on his head, or as he put it, -1 gravity. That's great. According to Star Trek TNG, where bags of mostly water, this is a fact. Although the Wienersmiths are just saying pillar instead of bag. America, in order to demonstrate the superiority of liberal democracy, launched monkeys. Then there's a footnote. This isn't entirely a joke. Oral histories report that Dr. Werner von Braun, the ex-Nazi missile designer who became the architect of the rockets that sent men to the moon, insisted primates were necessary to one-up the Soviets. By the way, fun fact, the only cat to ever go into space was Félicité, sent by the French. Apparently there already has been a cat in space. The French did it. So, Laika and Félicité, we salute you. Correction, ugly bags of mostly water. Is that Q? Was that a Q thing? Launch monkeys? How? Out of one's arse. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not drinking fast enough, apparently. But if non-human species were allowed to stake priority claims, humans would be in a competition with a cat, dogs, mice, tortoises, chimps, fruit flies, and a variety of monkey species. Also, the lizards we mentioned earlier, last week, know some sort of crystalline entity, if you remember correctly. I mean, fair. I haven't watched anywhere near all of TNG, which I do need to fix. But anyway, it's like Noah's Ark, only not everyone made it to the rainbow. Okay, so there's an illustration here with various rockets. One says flies go here, one says cat goes here, one says dog goes here. 68 fruit flies on a V2 rocket number 20, 1946. Félicité on Véronique, AG-147, 1963. And Laika on Sputnik PS number M12PS, 1957. It's literally called the crystalline entity. Okay, so that's the illustration that you're missing here. So I feel very, very much like the story time when I'm showing pictures, for sure. Laika, a gentle mutt from the streets of Moscow, was the first animal to orbit Earth. She died when her spacecraft unexpectedly overheated about 6 hours after launch on November 3rd, 1957. This shortened her life, but not much. Her ship, Sputnik 2, didn't come with a return capsule. In 1960, Soviet space puffs Belka and Strelka became the first dogs to orbit and safely return to Earth, where they remain to this day, in their taxidermied glory on display at the Cosmonautics Memorial Museum in Moscow. Upon landing, they were apparently none the worse for space wear. The same was not true for all space animals, even those who survived. Ham the chimp, an American, went up shortly before Gagarin had to briefly endure an acceleration of 15 times Earth's gravity. He was pretty pissed during his press conference the next day, screaming and baring his teeth at the reporters and photographers. Not typical behavior for NASA astronauts, but from a fairly physiological perspective, the good news was that Ham was very much alive. I'm with you. But the bug in the picture was flies. fruit flies, to be specific, Esme. And yeah, I agree with not launching animals to their death. There is a reason that I read the Laika bit in a different, more reverent tone of voice, because Laika deserves it. Yeah. I almost knocked my drink over, but to Laika. And indeed, after his hour and a half in orbit, so was Gagarin. He not only survived, he enjoyed humanity's first space meal. 2 tubes pureed meat, 1 tube chocolate sauce. This single orbit marked the beginning of human space medicine. But, like every voyage from the heady early years of space competition, it tells us little about space settlement. If you know anything about the heroic first decades of space travel, with their split-second decisions, hair's breadth escapes, their triumphs and their tragedies, well, sorry, but that stuff is mostly useless for our purposes. Armstrong and Aldrin spent about 3 hours walking around the moon. Prior to the 1970s, the longest space trip lasted about 2 weeks. That's not enough time for the most serious known space medicine issues to crop up. Long-term space medicine doesn't start until the Soviet Union, having lost the moon race, inaugurated the era of space stations with Salyut 1, first fielded in 1971. Since then, there have been so few space stations that we can document them completely on the following page. Footnote being, Salyut 2 was never crewed. If you've seen pictures with larger numbers of cosmonauts together in a space station, it's because there are more people during changeovers or when crews came up for short-term missions. To be fair, Esme, if I was going to spill my drink that time, it would have just been all over me. Come back. Apparently she needed a snack. Come. But yes, the baby has returned to be a bum. You don't need to sniff my drink. Where are you going? Clean your butthole. Hi. Lily butt. Lily butt. Everybody gets to see Lily butt. Lily butt. Check out Lily's butt. Sorry. I'm not sorry. I don't know why I said sorry. It is time for the wipes.
What are you yelling for?
I love her reaction to hearing that. Yeah, that's you being annoying. But yeah, I gotta pull out the wipes later, which I don't love. And she loves even less. Sit down. Lay down. Have a nap. I love you. But I'm busy. Okay. Over this time period, voyages generally got longer, until the peak 437 consecutive days was reached by cosmonaut Valery Polkayov. Oh God, I'm fucking terrible with Russian names. I don't know what to tell you. Nacho! Okay, I will pause at that moment. Nacho, hi! How's it going? Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate you. Let me shout you out real quick. Ready to see the kitty in me. Oh. You're not you don't need to be sorry. It's fine. We've been sidetracked by so many things, and I'm just happy that you're here. But yeah, I literally just finished being distracted by the cat coming back, so you're good. But yes, thank you for coming in here, Nacho's viewers. If you are not aware of who I am Raz. We hang out here 4 days a week.
What are you yelling for?
With this one, usually. And yeah, usually we just kind of play a variety of different games. Usually it's either World of Warcraft or Baldur's Gate mixed in with some cozy stuff, some fun indie stuff, things like that. And then, yeah, lately I've decided to start reading a book called A City on Mars on Mondays. Don't do what, Lily? What about Esme? Thank you very much for the follow, Hildy. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. But yeah, so basically on Mondays we're reading A City on Mars, which is a nonfiction book by the Wienersmiths, one of whom is the author and artist behind Saturday Morning Breakfast cartoons. Is it cartoons or comics? I forget. Whatever. It's just SMBC. But whatever. It's basically the subline is, can we settle space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through? So that is a pretty good summary of the contents of the book. So that we are finally on chapter 2, and it's only taken us 3 hours to get here. She was looking at the light like Pabu did before he caused major drama. Oh, I see. Nacho, you love that. What a nice way to spend a Monday evening. Yeah, I'm having a great time with it. It's very fun. We are drinking gin and cranberry juice today. And yeah, Lily's being adorable. She left for a bit, but now she's back demanding attention. But yeah, how is your stream, Nacho? How is Diablo? Did you have a good time? I hope you did. But yeah, I don't know. I used to stream on Sundays and I've stopped being able to do that. So I wanted to do something on Mondays instead. And we played a game called Deliver Us the Moon, where the mining helium-3 on the moon is a big plot point in that game. And this book has a very funny section detailing why going to the moon specifically to mine helium-3 is stupid and wrong and we need to stop putting it in all of our media. And so that is what inspired me to read this on stream, because I think everyone who was involved in that, and hopefully everyone else as well, will enjoy that. So I was going to just read that section, and then I was like, you know what? No, let's do this. Let's do this. Not just his stream was good, you got a lot done and smushed many demons. Excellent. Fantastic. I'm still super on the fence about buying Diablo. I want to, but even on 40% off, it's still expensive for me. So maybe one day. And as my next game will be Deliver Us Mom. Yeah, I mean, find it for me. We'll do it. Yeah, this week we'll be doing... Oh yeah, and Thursdays at this point are dedicated to Baldur's Gate multiplayer chaos. So tomorrow will be World of Warcraft, and Wednesday we will be trying to finish off Thirsty Suitors in honor of Valentine's Day. So that's where we're at. But yeah, welcome back on in. We are currently reading about the physiology of space and the effects that it has on the human body and whether or not long-term human life in space is even viable. Elaine, is that the one about people becoming astronauts by accident? Yeah. Something like that. You're looking forward to Wednesday, Esme. Yeah, Thirsty Suitors has been fantastically fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Look at this grumpy little fuzzball. Mom, stop petting me. Anyway. Over this time period, voyages generally got longer until the peak 437 consecutive days was reached by cosmonaut Valery Polyakov. Again, very bad at Russian names. During his 1994 to 1995 stint aboard Mir. Since then, only a handful of astronauts have gone for more than 6 months at a time. Still, the majority of our space medicine knowledge comes from the International Space Station, which remains the largest ever built, having about 6 times the space of the Salyut series and a regular crew of 6, whereas earlier space stations had 2 or 3 doing long-term missions. The good news from space is that it doesn't kill you immediately. As long as the equipment is working, space itself doesn't seem that dangerous, at least over moderate periods of time. When astronauts have gotten killed, it's always been due to a problem with the vehicle, never due to the slow, detrimental effects of the space environment. For the record, this book is at least lightly comedy. But as one of your authors reminds the other, whenever it's his turn to watch the kids, there are many intermediate points between alive and dead. Learning them gives us the best available look into the likely health problems of space settlers. Okay, so they did say they were going to detail all of the space stations that have ever been a thing on the next page, and they did do that. There are pictures in this, as you might expect for a book written by co-authored by a guy who draws comics. I will read all of these. So the first space station was the Salyut 1 in 1971, habitable volume 90 cubic meters. Skylab, 1973 to 74, habitable volume 361 cubic meters. Had a shower. Salyut 3, 1974 to 75, habitable volume 90 cubic meters. Fired a cannon. Salyut 4, 1947 to 77, habitable volume also 90 cubic meters. Apparently the Soviets they really stuck with that design. Salyut 5, habitable volume 100 cubic meters, 1976 to 77. Salyut 6, 1977 to 82, habitable volume 90 cubic meters. Salyut 7, 82 to 91, there's a movie about it, also 90 cubic meters. Mir, 1986 to 2001, first modular station, habitable volume 350 cubic meters. ISS, 1998 to today, habitable volume 388 cubic meters, has harbored at least one gorilla suit. Astronauts are a bunch of weirdos. It's like you'll never find you on a space station that doesn't have a shower. I mean, well, they all do now, but it's still probably not a very good one compared to Earth. All right, the Tiangong 1, 2011 to 18, habitable volume was 15 cubic meters. First non-US, non-USSR / Russia station. Tiangong 2, 2016 to 19, habitable volume 15 cubic meters. Tiangong Space Station, 2021 to today, habitable volume 110 cubic meters. Planned, not there yet. Drawings not even kind of to scale. Habitable volumes are maximums. Okay. I do love the there are many intermediate points between alive and dead. Esme, you can take a shower commando style. Yeah, as long as you can be clean, for sure. To be fair, the ones without showers, people weren't in them for very long. Well, mostly. The vacuum of space, or your body is a soda can. On Earth, air pushes on your skin from every direction with a consistent pressure of about 14 pounds per square inch, or, using ridiculous non-American units, 1 atmosphere. That's about the weight of 1 liter of water on every square centimeter of your skin. You don't notice this for the same reason a sea-bottom shrimp doesn't notice that the surrounding liquid could implode a submarine. Your body is adapted to the pressure near Earth's surface. It counterbalances the typical push of your surroundings, and you only rarely experience sudden pressure changes. Esme, is the soda tab on your can on your head? I mean, maybe? I would probably speculate somewhere else, but... I'm not gonna get into that. Oh, God. But consider a soda. When you buy a sealed bottle of Diet Pepsi, you know it's full of gas, but you don't see a lot of bubbles. That's because the bottle is held at about 4 times the surface air pressure of Earth, keeping carbon dioxide suspended sedately inside. When you open the top, you expose its contents to Earth's relatively gentle atmosphere. All that dissolved gas rushes out in the familiar bubbling foam. If you want to avoid the sudden burst of gas, you can always open your bottle 40 meters under the sea, where the pressure will keep the gas in place, and the seawater will make the Diet Pepsi taste no worse. I navel? Oh my god! Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. Your body is like the soda, except that the gas suspended in your fluids is nitrogen, absorbed from the atmosphere. If you were teleported to outer space where the air pressure level is none, your bodily fluids would react like the Diet Pepsi would open, only instead of a burst of foam, you'd get nitrogen bubbles blocking your veins and arteries, preventing the normal flow of blood, oxygen, and nutrients. This footnote. Okay, so the footnote is in relation to the fluids that are suspended in humans being nitrogen. And it says, technically, this means your body is more like a Guinness. We are informed by physicist friends that technically the amount of particles in outer space is non-zero. Kelly thinks this is a good point. Zach encourages them to try running a barometer in high orbit. Or just fart, yeah. Divers going from low depths back to the surface. I didn't read the first half of that sentence. My bad. This danger is familiar to divers going from low depths back to the surface. If you switch from high to low pressure too quickly, you get decompression sickness, colloquially known as the bends, because it often affects joints, causing the sufferer to bend in agony. If it's in your lungs, that's the chokes. If it's in your brain, you've got the staggers. If you're exposed to space, you'll most likely you'll just have the death. In fact, the only people who ever died in space were killed by a sudden loss of pressure. And the footnote on that is, there have been other spacecraft related deaths, but they occurred in Earth's atmosphere. Yes. It was June 30th, 1971, and cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky and Viktor Patsayev and Vladislav Volkov were returning from the Salyut 1. The 3 cosmonauts spent weeks performing zero-gravity acrobatics televised for the adoring Soviet public. They entered the capsule and, after some brief issues to get the hatch to seal, undocked and began their descent. When the ground crew arrived and the capsule was opened, the men were found, still seated, serene in death. Attempts to revive them proved useless. Each had suffered massive brain hemorrhaging. Subsequent investigation determined that when they undocked from their space station, a valve on the return craft had unexpectedly popped open, exposing them to a near-perfect vacuum. Decompression sickness isn't just a danger during accidents. It's an issue at any time you use a pressure suit. You may imagine a spacesuit as something like bulky clothing, but normal clothing doesn't have to provide a sealed habitat inside of itself. It'd be more accurate to imagine a leather balloon that happens to be shaped like a human. And like a balloon, the higher the internal pressure, the harder it is to bend. In a human-shaped balloon, high pressure means difficulty bending at the joints. Like, a lot of difficulty. A phenomenon called fingernail delamination is well documented, and we encourage you to not learn what it is, but I already know what it is! Oh god. I'm not gonna explain it for anyone who doesn't know, but I imagine you can figure it out. Thus, although the International Space Station is kept at Earth pressure, both American and Russian spacesuits only have to be around 1/3 of that. So, why don't astronauts get bendy, choky, staggery, and deathy when they don spacesuits? Because they pre-breathe pure oxygen before spacewalks, removing most of the nitrogen from their blood. No nitrogen bubbles. The footnote to that is, you may wonder why oxygen doesn't bubble out like nitrogen. The answer is that oxygen gets bound up in various molecules used by the body, so when the pressure drops, you don't get big bubbles of oxygen gas as you do with nitrogen. Hildy is screaming, and I understand and agree! Sorry, I'm a little bit behind here, Esme. You prefer to think of yourself as a glass bottle of beer as opposed to an aluminum can of soda, but what about an aluminum can of beer? At least a glass bottle of beer is harder to open. Usually this is true. 99 space balloons, yes. Okay, so Russian Orlan MKs and American EMU. There's a little illustration of spacesuits there. But interesting about the why oxygen doesn't do the bubbly thing. Movies may have led you to believe heroic astronauts can slip on a spacesuit and leap to the rescue, but under current designs, this would result in Brad Pitt clutching his joints and shambling to a very painful, if handsome, death. The astute nerd will ask, why not just keep the ISS at the same low pressure as the suit? The short answer is that although humans can survive in low pressure as long as there's enough oxygen floating around, engineers would have to design all equipment to operate in a low pressure, pure oxygen environment. But pure oxygen is dangerous. In 1967, during prep for the Apollo 1 flight, a spark went off in the crew capsule, causing an intense fire in the pure oxygen environment. The 3 astronauts, Edgar White II, Roger Chaffee, and Gus Grissom, could not be rescued because of the sudden increase in temperature and pressure made it impossible to use the inward opening hatch, while the intense heat prevented rescuers from saving them. Yeah. And the Apollo 1 fire set back space science and progress for a really long time because it scared the shit out of the public for very understandable reasons. Mortal Kombat Toasty. Jesus. We're getting all somber about Laika, then you throw that out. Whatever, I'm here for dark humor, that's fine. Oh, God. Okay. Less well known is a similar and earlier incident from the Soviet Union. In early 1961, Valentin Bondarenko, God, with these Russian names, why are there so many Russian names? Because of the cosmonauts, I know why, but was training to be a cosmonaut, and one of the training exercises was to spend 10 days in a high-oxygen pressurized chamber. Near the end of confinement, he removed a medical sensor from his body and wiped the sticky glue from the sensor off with an alcohol swab. He absent-mindedly threw it aside, where it landed on an electric hot plate. Oh, God. The resulting fire quickly got out of control, consuming his suit. Oxygen had to be bled out of the chamber before rescuers could reach him, and he died of shock soon after. This happened just a month before Gagarin became the first human to reach outer space. The Soviets preferred to keep their failures a secret, and so when the Apollo 15 astronauts left a plaque on the moon with the names of astronauts and cosmonauts who lost their lives in the race for the moon, Bondarenko was not included. His story was only finally shared a quarter century after his passing. That's a shame. That's a genuine shame. Hilda, you don't need horror stories, you just need some science to scare you. Absolutely. That is a fact, especially when it comes to space and the ocean. Honestly, nature facts will do it for you too, believe me. Why not both at the same time? See Event Horizon. Yeah. My particular brand of science nerdery mostly involves space, and there's honestly, even the deaths is kind of nothing after the whole fingernail delamination thing. Like, I mean, they're obviously both really bad in different ways, but just, like, in terms of my visceral imagination. Oh, now we're at the Titan sub again. The Titan sub came up at supper last night, and I was like, yeah, the Alien franchise for sure. I haven't ever watched any of them because I'm shit with horror movies. I'm a baby. But yeah, I was saying, like, the first time I saw the news about the Titan sub was, like, the day after they started, or the day of or day after they started searching. And as soon as I heard the scenario, I was like, they're gone. They're gone. There's no chance. And I am not happy to have been right about that, but at least it was quick. So, anyway, we don't need to get sidetracked by that one. The lack of air in space is well known, which makes it easy to forget just how many aspects of life we'll have to change if humans expand into space. Vacuum is potentially fatal and perpetually annoying. The risk also changes for the worse as the human presence in space increases, because going to space necessarily involves objects at high speed relative to each other. Orbital velocity is about 8 kilometers per second. Around 3 kilometers per second, if an object smacks into your spaceship, it delivers roughly the kinetic energy of its own weight in TNT. As long as objects are moving in the same direction at the same speed, things are okay, but in reality they often aren't. This is especially true when nations decide to destroy satellites, sending debris in every direction, as the US, Russia, China, and India have all done. This is a bigger problem for open space settlement concepts than for surface settlements, but regardless of where your habitat is positioned, the fact that death is ever present is going to have social and political consequences. In a space settlement, oxygen will be created by chemical or biological means, but either way, it's going to be constructed using systems built top to bottom by human hands. Someone's going to own those. Some space settlement theorists have argued that the need for artificial atmospheres creates the potential for autocratic control of the stuff of existence. Dr. Charles Cockle, an astrobiologist, has argued on this basis that there should be engineering for liberty, such as making sure oxygen creation systems are distributed rather than centralized. We don't know whether this sort of thing will work, but it's likely that the politics of space settlements will be influenced by the physics of space settlements and not necessarily for the good. Okay, so there is a little graph here. Okay, we're talking about the case for space environmentalism. This graph is about debris in space and total objects and debris going up. So there's the bottom line is active spacecraft, the middle line is debris, the top line is total objects. There's a huge spike in 2007 when China explodes its own satellite, and in 2009, Iridium Cosmos satellite collision. That's what we're looking at. There we go. Esme, you'll take the Sequest DSV over Star Trek. Not that you don't like Star Trek, but Deep Sea is more your jam. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised to hear that just because it hasn't really come up before, but that's cool. I am very much not a deep sea person. It might seem kind of dumb with how excited I am about space, but the ocean fucking scares the shit out of me. Like, not to a phobia level, but the ocean is fucking scary. So, which, to be fair, most people find space scary too, and to some extent so do I. It just doesn't deter me. As where you love sharks, that's fair. I also think sharks are pretty fucking great. So, fair. What is this subline, guys? Explosions and nudity. Lessons on radiation in space. Assuming you have found a way to deal with the near emptiness of space, you should now think about an unfriendly presence in the void: radiation. Under special circumstances, radiation can kill fast, but the bigger concern in space is a slow but serious increase in the risk of medical issues, particularly cancer. This is especially worrisome when we imagine going from a world of middle-aged professionals doing a year in orbit to a world where children grow up in space. The need to stop radiation is one of the major factors that will shape human habitation designs off-world, and it will therefore have major effects on quality of life. The problem is that with current knowledge, it's hard to predict the effect of radiation on the body. Nude explosion, yeah. I don't want to follow that thought. I need to, like, hydrate more, but drinking then makes my mouth water for a bit, which makes it harder to talk. Radiation is everywhere. Radiation is sometimes thought to be unnatural, something you encounter only via nuclear waste or atomic bombs. In fact, you are surrounded by materials that emit radiation. Radiation comes from the sky, from the ground, from food. The banana equivalent dose is a frequently used metric for radiation exposure, since bananas contain potassium-40, a radioactive isotope, yet remain a healthy dietary option that 50% of your authors believe is excellent in pudding. Some behaviors apt to increase your relative radiation dose include eating Brazil nuts, going to bed with a human next to you, or taking a trip to Denver, Colorado. Some daredevils may have done all three at once. As with pressure, the human body evolved in an environment with certain types of radiation at ranges found on Earth. The reason cancer and superpowers remain rare is that the most radiation we experience is quietly dealt with by our bodies. The thin shell of dead skin around you provides a natural shield, and your internal machinery is reasonably good at repairing or destroying radiation-damaged cells. The problem in space is that unless you have sufficient shielding, which we'll explore later, you get higher doses of radiation, and radiation of different types than you'd get on Earth. This radiation comes largely from two places, the sun and the rest of the universe. Lesbian orgy is where your mind goes. I mean, that's probably more fun than dying in space. The sun wants you dead. As a radiant ball of plasma, the sun already spends most of its time blasting out hot ions in every direction. Earth's magnetosphere and atmosphere protect you from most of these. If you're in space, all things being equal, you'd rather avoid solar radiation, but it doesn't cause instant death. However, now and then, the sun undergoes a solar flare when it suddenly increases in brightness. Insufficient shielding equals the Fantastic Four, yeah. I need to watch the I need to watch the trash version of that, but I mean the early 2000s trash version, not the more recent trash version. Petition for a good Fantastic Four movie! Although I do like the older trash version, it's fun, even though it's not, like, objectively good. The original Xbox original game based on it was great, though. Just saying. And then there's something worse. Sometimes a solar flare is accompanied by a solar particle event, which is a particle event in the same sense that a tsunami is a water event. Visualize a relatively small region of the sun suddenly ejecting a huge stream of protons that move in one direction like a flashlight beam of death. MCU Fantastic Four is coming. I know, but that doesn't... I don't have confidence that that'll make it... that'll be good, but we could cross our fingers and hope. The good news about these things is that, as the science fiction deity Douglas Adams put it, space is big. Randomly aimed death beams will likely miss a teeny tiny human ship. But if you happen to be caught in the headlights, the result will be acute radiation sickness whose symptoms include vomiting, skin burns, heart issues, lung damage, compromised immune system, and, if the dose is large enough, a painful death. There are a lot of people that would disagree with you about MCU movies getting better. But also, I haven't watched a lot of the recent ones, so I don't really have a strong opinion. Although the third Guardians of the Galaxy was, in fact, very good, so. Depends on who's in charge and how cynical Disney is feeling. You may wonder what the plan is if you happen to be aboard a spaceship for this sort of thing. For near-term efforts to go back to the moon, the procedure, in the words of NASA scientist Dr. Carey Lee, is to make use of whatever mass is available. That is, redistribute whatever stuff in the spacecraft or station that you can find, because it is now your radiation shield. Why not a dedicated radiation blocker? Because that's a huge amount of mass that costs a lot to send to the moon and then just sits there. Space settlements will need to do better, and as we'll see, the likely solution involves living underground. Actually, the whole universe wants you dead. Sometimes a star explodes. This is rare, but happens frequently enough that space is a crossfire of the results. And that's mostly because there are so many stars. Although they are at relatively low density, very fast charged particles are everywhere. Most of this stuff is low mass, individual protons or helium atoms, but a small percent of the products of these explosions are heavy, fast charged particles. Hydrogen, helium, iron. Here. They have a graphic that is showing the relative size of a hydrogen atom, helium, and then iron. These guys are dangerous. In one experiment, iron nuclei with high energy were fired into a gel-like substance to simulate what space might do to the human body. Individual iron nuclei, single atoms, why am I saying atoms? Weird. Blasted out tunnels as thick as a human hair. So human hair is 50 microns across, and the iron nucleus is 1/1,000,000th of a micron across. Not even kind of, sort of, vaguely closely to scale on that piece. So there's the atom size comparison. Oh god. And then the human hair versus the teeny tiny iron ion the atom that is not to scale. Esme, from what you hear, people are shitting on Quantumania. You love the crap out of it. To be fair, it is also just popular and money-making to hate Marvel movies right now. I haven't watched Quantumania yet, but I'd be willing to. The universe doesn't want you dead. Death wants you dead. From the moment we are conceived, death is trailing us. I mean, this is true, but the universe is also prepared to murder you in several creative ways. Part of the reason I think magnetars are so cool is because of just how easily they will fucking shred you into nothing. Space is fucking metal. Exposure to this galactic cosmic radiation is a constant part of life in space. Astronauts sometimes report flashes of light that only they can see, and this may be the result of their eyes being struck by these far-traveling bits of doomed stars. Current estimates say that once you leave Earth's protective atmosphere and magnetosphere, every single cell nucleus in your body will be struck by a proton every few days and by a larger charged particle every few months. Radiation is coming for your equipment. Radiation can also mess with our technology. In 1859, our planet was hit by a solar particle event that became known as the Carrington event after British astronomer Richard Carrington. This was the last massive coronal mass ejection to hit Earth and would absolutely fucking devastate our technology if it happened again today. Don't stand in one place while a toilet seat from the ISS is hurtling towards your head. See, dead like me. You know, I don't... Did I ever finish that? Because I know it got, like, unceremoniously canceled, but it was good shit. Okay. Sorry. Records from August 28th, 1859, all over America document the effects. In one Boston office at about 6:30 p.m., all the outgoing telegraph lines simply stopped working. And yes, it did manage to fuck up telegraphs, but that was, like, the most advanced communication technology at the time. Can you imagine what it would do to us now? In Pittsburgh, sudden currents in their electrical system compelled telegraph operators to disconnect the batteries. When they did, streams of fire and sparks jumped out. That night, from California to Britain to Greece to Australia, something like the Northern Lights was observed, with one man describing a cupola on fire, supported by columns of diverse colors. Disruption continued throughout the day because, as one author wrote, Earth's atmosphere was still ringing with electrical and magnetic energy. Streams of fire will likely be even less pleasant if you live in a built habitat where electrically powered machines are responsible for ventilation. Nothing like this has happened since, though in 2012, an event of similar power to the one in 1859 missed Earth by what astronomer Dr. Phil Plait told us was a not large enough to make me happy amount, which is a great quote. Radiation appears to cause problems from time to time on the ISS as well. Here's a story from How to Astronaut, Terry Virt's memoir on life on the ISS. It was during a 2014 expedition when he suddenly heard a blaring klaxon. The crew raced to see what was up and found the ATM alarm lit, ATM for atmosphere. Virts assumed it was a minor leak or false alarm, but Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti remembered exactly what the alarm meant, shouting, "No! Ammonia leak!" Ammonia is not something you want in your space station. Lovely for your cooling system, but toxic for humans and hard to remove. If enough leaked in, it could render the whole station uninhabitable, and in the very worst case, extra gas might overpressurize and even rupture a module. The protocol they were supposed to follow went something like this. 1. Oxygen masks on. 2. Float over to the Russian segment, close the first hatch. 3. Get naked. 4. Close the second hatch, seal off the American segment. You might be wondering about one of those steps, but there's a simple explanation. You seal the American segment because the Russian coolant system uses glycol, not ammonia. So if there's an ammonia leak, it's on the American end. Yes, that was the part we were questioning, definitely not the nudity. Oh, step 3. Well, ammonia contaminates clothes, so for safety you should leave them back in the ammonia zone and hope the Russians have spare undies. Following the ammonia alarm, the crew decided not to follow the letter of the law, mostly because they didn't smell like ammonia, so they figured it was a false alarm. Or maybe they decided sudden zero-gravity views of naked coworkers was worse than death. This entire routine happened a second time, including the now customary Ellison of Step 3. Let this be a lesson for any space settlement planner who expects to control human behavior or to predict it based on rational self-interest. Anyway, what's this got to do with radiation? Although there's no way to be 100% certain, a suspected cause of the false alarm was radiation thwacking into the equipment. Radiation has caused problems farther out as well. In 2003, while the Mars Odyssey orbiter circled the red planet, the sun fired off a huge blast of radiation, which knocked the orbiter out of contact and into safe mode. One of its sensors, designed to detect radiation, was permanently destroyed. In the words of one scientist, it choked on the data. Try to imagine being in a Mars-orbiting spacecraft, suddenly losing contact with home, and then being informed that your radiation detector stopped working due to too much radiation. Yes, you were right. I vote get naked, and you were right, get naked, yes. Oh god, how much left of this chapter do we have? Too much. Too much of this chapter. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do this. If we can make it through this chapter, then the third chapter is about space sex. So we have that to look forward to soon. Your shielding wants you dead too. Oh, and this is fun. Even if you provide thick shielding against radiation, you can still get hit by spallation. Spallation? Sadly, spome and spallation are linguistically unrelated. Spallation comes from a much older word meaning chip, in the sense of a broken off bit. When fast, heavy ions smack into your shielding and slow down, they can generate cascades of secondary and biologically dangerous particles, sometimes known as a nuclear shower. Innocent high-speed particle hits nucleus in your shield, which is a cascade of brand new terrible stuff! Yay! Go to 10. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not even 100% sure we're going to finish the chapter if I go to 10, but yeah, we can do that. This is the best stream you've participated so far this year. I mean, thank you. Spallation is particularly illustrative of how mind-bendingly complex designing for space is once you get into the details. For example, if your radiation shield is super thick and is made from aluminum, you can end up being exposed to even more radiation than you would if you had no shielding at all. The decisive answer on radiation. So, space radiation is bad, right? Well, yes, probably, we think. It turns out it's hard to do science on this stuff. The best available data comes from lab animals, from people who've worked with radioactive materials, and from times when something horrific happened, such as the disaster at Chernobyl or when the United States dropped atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Even these data are imperfect for assessing space radiation. For instance, atomic weapon victims got a sudden massive dose of what was probably mostly neutrons, whereas the typical experience of space involves long-term exposure to charged particles. Lab animal studies are also imperfect because their application to humans is not one-to-one, and anyhow, it's hard to generate space-like radiation in a lab setting. But wait, you say, we have 50 years of humans on space stations. Doesn't that tell us anything? Sure, it tells us something, but because all space stations orbit under the protection of Earth's magnetosphere, astronauts are exposed to space radiation at doses that are something like 2 to 3 times less than what you'd get out in deep space. Magnetic field line deflects particles, particles directed to poles equals free light show. So, there you go. Aluminium. Yes, Banquos. Pew pew. How'd your dungeons go, friend? The only direct source we have, then, on the physiological effects of beyond the magnetosphere radiation comes from those Apollo missions that went to the moon and back, the longest of which was the Apollo 17 mission, which only lasted about 12 and a half days. A typical Mars transit time is around 6 months. The good news is that though the Apollo guys got a huge dose of extra radiation, they don't appear to have had higher rates of cancer. That's encouraging, but the problem is that it's a tiny sample set, exactly 24 men. Also, they're not the least bit random. They're ultra elites, most of them test pilots, and all of them got through medical exams that were so thorough they bordered on the sadistic, including intimate encounters with something they referred to as the steel eel. If these men had less cancer than you'd expect, perhaps it's because they were just a little more robust than most of us. So full of radiation. Jesus, with your pregnant Pikachu Banquos. Why? You like to see me suffer, I understand. A more ominous explanation is that the radiation cancer link is real, but not perfectly understood. Doubly so for space. If you've ever wanted to read the scientific equivalent of a plaintive shrug, here's a line from the 2018 paper, Limitations in Predicting the Space Radiation Health Risk for Exploring Astronauts. There's no definitive evidence that space radiation causes human cancer, but it is reasonable to assume that it can. Wow, that is in fact a plaintive shrug. The science isn't perfectly clear, but space agencies still need policies. Based on models from the National Radiation Council, NASA has rules for radiation dose levels. Nobody gets more than a 3% risk of exposure-induced death. Footnote on that is, for the dedicated nerd, here's what that means. According to a recent National Academy of Sciences report, 3% risk of exposure-induced death implies that within the cohort of 100 astronauts, 3 are likely to die of radiation-induced cancer at some point in their lifetime. My suffering is 60. Pregnant Pikachu, is it though? This apparently reasonable limit creates odd consequences. As it happens, death is not equal opportunity. Some evidence from atomic bomb survivors indicate that ovarian and breast tissue are especially susceptible to radiation damage. Because of this, a few space advocates even call for a no girls allowed rule for long-term Mars missions. This might put a damper on plans for population growth in a future settlement. However, under current standards, Mars might be no boys allowed either. The current record for total months is held by Gennady Padalka, who spent about 29 months in space across 5 flights. That amount of exposure would exceed current NASA limits for all ages. A realistic Mars trip would take longer, with no breaks in between trips. So it's no girls allowed in that it's no humans allowed. It's also certainly no-go for experienced spacefarers who are already near or beyond the radiation limit. The solution? A recent paper by the National Academy of Sciences has argued, in short, that if we want to use veteran astronauts for a Mars trip, we must use Earth's most powerful defense mechanism, a signed waiver. And yes, Esme girls do need to be allowed for various reasons. Also, there are also several counter arguments that suggest that women are actually better astronauts, and a lot of that has to do with center of gravity and weight. And height averages and stuff like that, because smaller is better for astronauts in a lot of ways. Okay, so we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a half pages left. Oh god. Space's special problem, microgravity. Although astronauts are well within the pull of Earth's gravity, their circular orbit means they are perpetually falling towards Earth, sort of like a roller coaster drop that never ends. Thus, they float, just as they would if untouched by any powerful gravity. Like a roller coaster, the sensation of falling often induces vomiting, but this typically goes away in a few days. Once settled in, astronauts often describe microgravity as one of the singular joys of orbit. But it's not great for the human body. Microgravity causes predictable physiological problems, some of which are short-term, some of which may be permanent, some of which may still be undiscovered because humans haven't spent enough time in space yet. If this book were about planning a 1-year camping trip in orbit, we could offer you some excellent advice. But you're planning to settle space. Here we confess to a major problem with the data. No serious space settlement plan calls for extended life in microgravity. But this is exactly the gravity regime from which almost all space medicine data comes. The vast majority of proposals for space settlement are about the Moon, which has about 1/6 Earth gravity, or Mars, which has about 2/5 Earth gravity. Most other proposals are for rotating space stations that can artificially create regular old Earth gravity. We have almost no medical data about life in partial Earth gravity. The best we have is the 12 guys who collectively spent less than a month on the lunar surface. If there are serious negative effects of life in partial gravity, they likely take longer to show up. Esme, you love roller coasters and banquets. Look, just because it costs less to send one of you doesn't mean you get to dominate space. It's not just the cost, but, you know. Yeah, Lily has buried herself in the box. This leaves a lot of scope for wrongness. It may be that the low gravity of the Moon is nevertheless Earth-like enough to spare the human body the worst problems found in microgravity. Or it may be that the effects are broadly similar to those found in microgravity, but take longer to show up. It may also be that there are weird new problems we didn't anticipate. In terms of understanding the space environment, the best thing we can do in general is tell you what it's been like so far. That's what we'll do. That's what we'll do here, but understand that our ability to draw conclusions is limited and that getting better data will likely await a large-scale rotating spacecraft experiment or a first moon base. Your soon-to-be pathetic physique, the human body in microgravity. From the perspective of bones, walking around is just getting picked up and slammed down again, over and over. Your body is prepared for this, but your body is a cheapskate. Bones and muscles are use it or lose it affair, and when you're floating in microgravity, you often don't use it. In space, legs provide thrust up a wall and help anchor your body to the ubiquitous Velcro straps, but most maneuvering is done with the upper body, leaving the rest of you to languish. 4 months in space means about 1% loss of mass in the spine per month. Incidentally, while your spine is degrading, it's also lengthening in zero gravity. Because of this, lower back pain is quite common in space and post-flight. According to an account by Mike Mullane, on a 1984 flight, the 5 men aboard had serious back issues. The only person without pain was the lone female flyer, Dr. Judy Resnick. Mullane recalls her saying, "I don't believe it. Here I'm going to be going to bed with 5 men and they all have backaches." What a legend. As he says, by the way, the moon can't be terraformed because it has no water. Have to bring water to it. Can only be calciformed. Yes, correct. Also, there's no atmosphere and not enough gravity to retain an atmosphere, and like actual terraforming of the moon is just never going to happen. Muscles suffer a similar fate to bones. One study of the ISS astronauts found their calf muscles had shrunk 13% after 6 months in orbit. That might not sound too bad, but note that during those 6 months, the astronauts were doing regular multi-hour exercise routines. Most spacefarers are back to normal after a month or 2 on Earth, but in some cases it can take 6 months to 3 years. So after a little time in space, you'll have osteoporosis, weak muscles, and back problems. And, by the way, all that lost bone calcium can contribute to constipation and renal stones, because it's floating around in the rest of you. You have left the cradle of Earth for the nursing home of orbit. After more than 50 years of research in space stations, the best solutions available for these problems are the 2 worst words in any language: diet and exercise. Vitamin D supplements and osteoporosis medication appear to help with bone loss, and astronauts are still expected to put in 2.5 hours of exercise a day, 6 days a week, to slow muscle and bone deterioration. This is despite the fact that space exercise is the most frequent source of space injury. For a space settlement with partial Earth gravity, it is possible that settlers could simulate Earth gravity by wearing weighted clothing. For now, the very long-term effects of exposure to zero or partial Earth gravity are unknown. And as to what the effects would be on a developing human child, we haven't got a clue. He's giggling, presumably, about the woman going to bed with 5 men with backaches. Seriously, what a legend. It's in your head, the horrible and apparently sexy world of fluid shifts. We sometimes think of our circulatory system as a pump with pipes. The heart beats away and blood goes where it needs to go. This is kind of true, but substantially too simple. Blood above your heart just has to fall down to reach it. Blood in your feet needs a good strong push to make its way upward. Well, unless you're doing a handstand, in which case it's reversed. In a way it is unimaginable for the plumbing of a house, your circulatory system stays functional whether you're flat on your back, lying sideways, or hanging upside down. But when you stay in zero gravity for a while, things get weird. Your legs pump away as if they're still fighting the gravity humans evolved with. Fluid shifts upward, causing your legs' fluid volume to decrease. The result is what one paper referred to as puffy-faced bird leg syndrome. Plus, with your body baffled by various fluids being up so high, you'll make more frequent trips to the bathroom. Is this bad? Depends on who you ask. As veteran astronaut Lieutenant General Susan Helms said in an interview for the ahead-of-its-time classic book Sex in Space, you lose weight and wrinkles while gaining skinnier legs and more height. Some of you may not take heart at the idea of billionaire space settlers also becoming incredibly sexy en route to Mars, but the good news is that during the trip, their bodies will forget how to manage blood flow against gravity, possibly causing dizziness or even fainting as they exit the landing craft. Our best countermeasure to date is pretty low tech. Drink something salty like consomme or sports beverages. Load up on electrolytes and fluid before you return to normal gravity, raising your blood pressure and getting your total fluid load close to normal. Yeah. Oh boy. My throat is getting scratchy, so definitely end of this chapter is the end of our stream for today. But I'm loving this. This is great, and I hope you guys are having fun too. Your eye in the sky may be permanently damaged. Microgravity appears to screw up your vision. We don't know why, but the best guess is that the upward fluid shift increases the pressure in your head, altering the shape of your eyeballs and the blood vessels that feed them. Problems appear to get worse the longer you spend in space. In one survey of 300 astronauts, 23% of those who went on shuttle missions reported difficulty seeing things close up after coming home. That's pretty bad, given that the shuttle missions tended to last around 2 weeks or less. Among those who did longer duration ISS trips, the numbers rose to 50%. The problem is more common in astronauts over 40, and they are therefore prescribed spectacles in anticipation of farsightedness. These are called Space Anticipation Glasses, SAG. Thanks, NASA acronym team. The over 40 crowd salutes you. Yeah. Skinny legs and bigger heads plus gray skin. Are we time traveling aliens? Maybe. We know most about how this problem impacts eyeballs, though. Though it's possible eyes are just the most detectable form of damage and more subtle effects are happening to the brain itself. We aren't going to linger on this because at the moment the data are unclear, but there is a possibility that space conditions have cognitive effects. Frankly, between the radiation and the fluid shifts, cumulative brain damage doesn't sound like an especially wild conjecture. If this is a subtle issue that gets worse over time, it'll take on a lot of importance for any space settlement plan. And all of the microgravity-related problems we've discussed could get more serious given longer time horizons. Suppose you spend 10 years adapting to Mars gravity. Can you come back to Earth? We don't know. And we really don't know the answer if your 10 years started at age 0. There aren't any great countermeasures here, but one device tested over the years puts your entire lower half in reduced pressure to convince your fluids to head south. Oh my god. I didn't really almost knock this over, but it was close enough that it scared the shit out of me. That is the second time this evening. Usually my drink is more off to the side. Okay, so putting your entire lower half in reduced pressure to convince your fluids to head south. These pants that suck, as Scott Kelly referred to them, may come with risks. According to his account, a cosmonaut using them once passed out as his heart rate dropped. Scott Kelly nearly did, too, due to an error on the pressure setting. On Earth, the eyeball problem is studied by making people lie down for days at a time, which produces changes in the eye that we think are similar to what's happening in space. This has allowed for tests of new equipment, and recent work has moved beyond the primitive world of sucky pants. One on-the-ground study trialed out an entire sucky sleeping bag, and it did seem to be helping. Whether sucky pants and sucky sleeping bags will be required on space settlements is a matter for intrepid voyagers of the future. Hooray! I'm an astronaut! Sucky pants. The two sides of space brain changes. You either get brain damage or become a new type. Yeah. For sure. Fluid shifts aren't necessarily the first thing you think of when you imagine space settlement, but given enough time, they could be among the most important. Life in partial gravity may not produce the same sort of damage, but if it does, space settlements will have to plan for relatively serious vision impairment in most of their citizenry. If there are more serious problems such as cognitive effects, well, let's just hope the sucky pants get a bit more streamlined. At SPO Medical Care, Trauma Medicine Off-World. One of our most potent medical strategies is simply to screen out anyone with even a moderate medical issue. But trauma is harder to avoid because you can't screen for people who won't have an experiment accidentally crush them. On Earth, common traumatic injury is stuff like airway obstruction, fractures, head injuries, and in general, bleeding where you ought not to bleed. The basic job of a trauma surgeon is to make sure you're breathing and not bleeding too much. Things that should be done on site as quickly as possible, ideally in a matter of minutes. But even in the ISS, which is only a few hundred miles from Earth's surface, evacuation takes 6 to 24 hours. There are good reasons to worry about this. After a long space journey, spacefarers will have all of the bodily weakness issues we described above, plus short-term effects pertaining to the change in gravity regime, such as nausea, dizziness, and clumsiness. Footnote. Clumsiness is a problem because your sense of proprioception, that is, the sense of where your body parts are, gets thrown off because in changed gravity, your body doesn't hang in its normal way. Also, lots of astronauts report breaking objects because they've forgotten that when you let go of something in gravity, it goes down. Sucky bounce stance sounds so wrong. Hadn't occurred to me that way, Esme, but you're right. Okay. They then enter an unfamiliar environment where there is an onus on them to get to work. Accidents will happen. Unless there's a dedicated sickbay with a proper air filter system, space settlement surgeons won't have an ideal operating room. This is especially true in microgravity, where food, microbes, and bits of human waste may be floating around. If surgery is required, the doctor must be trained for the particular gravity regime they're working in. For instance, according to one paper, blood tends tends to pool and form domes that can fragment on disruption by instruments. Space trauma surgeons may need specialized imaging training for the gravities they plan to experience. Although there has never been a dedicated medical center in space settlements will need them. Near-term proposals include dedicated space station modules called trauma pods, or a surgical workstation, a sort of inflatable tent that goes around the patient, protecting them from the environment and vice versa. An alternative proposal is to use minimally invasive surgery. Make a tiny sterile incision and do your work inside, effectively using the body cavity as the surgery workstation. This is theoretically great and works well on Earth, but only works for a subset of medical issues. Also, at least in microgravity, there are problems no Earth doctor has ever experienced. As one paper said, bowel floats in the operating field. Yikes. Another noted, the tendency of organs to eviscerate has also been reported. Yikes! Bankos, it's one of your favorite jokes in Gundam. Sucky pantses? Esme's never watched any Gundam, you know of it though. Yeah, I know barely anything about Gundam, but I know that it exists, and I've seen lots of like the figures. Well, you'll at least get some anesthesia while this is going on, right? Yes, but you can't use inhaled anesthetics because if there's a leak, you've just released laughing gas into the sealed atmosphere. Another option is spinal anesthesia, but with your fluids shifting upward, the anesthetic might not end up where you want it to go. Your best bet will likely be injection at the site. And by the way, it may not work right. Evidence suggests that human bodies don't absorb nutrients and medication at the same rate in zero gravity. This isn't surprising considering all the fluid shifting and the fact that your stomach contents float, but it does mean that any medication, especially serious stuff like anesthesia, will need to be recertified for each new gravity regime. Incidentally, you may be wondering how we know so much about zero-gravity trauma surgery. How many dramatic trauma surgeries have been performed in space? The answer is 0, at least on humans. We do have, for instance, 2 space shuttle trips where surgical experiments were done on rodents, including one that validated the use of local anesthesia. But that doesn't explain why we know a lot of other weird stuff. Sutures can be done in zero gravity, and apparently it's possible to make burr holes in heads while floating. Blood forms domes, viscera wander! The curious reader will be referred to the copious scientific literature containing the words porcine and parabolic with titles like cardiopulmonary resuscitation in microgravity, efficacy of in the swine drink parabolic flight. Parabolic flights are a common way to test equipment and protocol in simulated weightlessness. In short, if you fly a plane in a parabola, which with just the right arc, you get about 30 seconds of free fall. Vomit comet. Suppositories may be the way to go. I mean, maybe. But then that's still an absorption rate issue, right? Do this over and over frequently enough and you can get a good hour of simulated weightlessness in a single day. And if you bring along a dead pig and some very, 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 very dedicated medical practitioners, you can find out a thing or two about space medical procedures. We can't go in depth here because this book is sadly not about the brave men and women who endured repeated roller coaster-like plane trips to perform precision surgery on a once oinky friend. No poet will sing their song, nor should they. But if you've ever wondered, can we find out how to do a craniotomy in space? The answer is yes, when pigs fly. The good news for space settlement surgeons is that partial gravity probably makes a big difference. If someone spurts blood on the moon, it'll fall in slow motion, but it will eventually find its way to the ground and ideally a drain. The bad news is that you've got an unfamiliar environment with tight working conditions, limited supplies, and no ability to helicopter your patient out to the trauma ward. And there's a footnote about the vomit. Oh, yeah, okay. It's literally the footnote is literally just NASA's parabolic flight plane goes by the highly descriptive name Vomit Comet, which I knew. Accidents should be planned for. Even the badass space heroes of the Apollo program reported frequent falls just walking around the lunar surface and setting up experiments. Any near-term space settlement will be an active construction site employing workers who grew up in a totally different environment. Trauma medicine is a must, even if it calls for a costly amount of mass. The future. Worse? Part of why there has never been space surgery is that we don't generally make astronauts of people likely to have medical problems. Although apparently there was one that was a surgeon. But things are changing as space becomes more commercialized. As space tourism grows, the major qualifications for an orbital trip won't be ability, training, and good health, but rather a substantial bank account and the willingness to sign a waiver. The future of space medicine will therefore be less about selecting healthy individuals and more about managing pre-existing conditions, a much harder problem about which we know much less, but one we must master if we want to have cities on other worlds. For now, take a moment to appreciate the scale of our ignorance. Our longest term space voyage is about 1.3 years. Very few astronauts have gotten anywhere near that total. We have no data on long-term effects of radiation on human bodies outside Earth's magnetosphere. We have almost no data for partial gravity regimes. We have almost no data on people with chronic health issues. We suspect that none of these problems preclude space settlement. Assuming a budget of infinity dollars and a lot of technological development, a giant rotating space base with thick shielding might fix pretty much everything. We'll explore whether that's a good idea later, but the important thing is that the above issues may not be insurmountable obstacles. You shouldn't think of them as necessarily deciding whether or not we go to space, but as shaping the constraints whenever we do go to space. The more science and technology we have, the less annoying those constraints will be. What does this mean for our intrepid settler Astrid? And those of you, if you missed last week's chapter, they have an imaginary person named Astrid that they are going to subject to all of the things they're discussing and then kind of review what would have happened to Astrid at the end of the book. So what does this mean for our intrepid settler Astrid? A pressure suit, some sucky pants, and sag. The good news is right now, she only feels physically awkward. That will change as we consider a more intimate topic. Also, this is the state of Astrid at the moment. That is really hard to see, I'm sorry. Waver, see aforementioned Titan subs, yeah. And Esme, there are those that want to believe that Nazis already have a lunar colony. I mean, impressive, but yes. Okay, anyway, that is the end of the chapter. Chapter 3 is titled Space, Sex, and Consequences Thereof, so you can look forward to that next week. If you are excited about space sex conversations, we will be here for you next week. Is that a bonk? That is a bonk, Banquos. Nice. Just me awkwardly putting this dust jacket back on. Don't worry about it. Esme, you can't wait for next Monday. I'm glad. I am very glad that this has been thus far a successful experiment. I am having quite a good time. Okay. Book restored to book jacket. Dust jacket. You are very welcome, Esme. I am glad that you have had fun. It is a good time. And yeah, almost 3 full hours, and I was only like 5 minutes late, so go us. Hi, Lily. But yeah, feels kind of unceremonious, but yeah. Backwards, you can't wait to hear about how they have to put duct tape on their feet. I don't know if I know what that's about, but that sounds like the sort of innovation that astronauts would get up to. Wait till we get to the part about astronaut food. That's gonna be fun. I don't know how far through the book the Helium-3 rant is, but I'm looking forward to it. So, snowshoes, not feet. Just let me chug this gin real quick while we're still here. I did it. Look at me go. So yes. For anyone new that stuck around, thank you so much. It has been wonderful to have you. To everybody else, thank you for being here once again and choosing to spend your time with me this evening. I have enjoyed it immensely, and I am delighted to have you. Yeah, tomorrow is going to be some World of Warcraft. We're going to check what's in our vault. I have plans for Valentine's Day on Wednesday, so I think I'm going to try and get a heroic Farak kill in tomorrow. Possibly farther? Or like more of the raid. I don't know. We'll see. We'll miss raiding with the group that I usually raid with, but you know, I need to get that my weekly dose of crushing devastation when I don't get the legendary. And okay, so it's from an Ursula K. Le Guin book. I need to read Ursula's work. I really do. It's a tragedy that I haven't. Esme, Dill had to duct tape on your left snowshoe because Soul fell off. Oh no, that sucks. I've only snowshoed once in my entire life, but it was fun. So, yes, baby says goodbye, apparently. Go have a cuddle. But yeah, I'm gonna go shower and throw myself into bed. Yeah. Love you all. You are wonderful. It is great to have you. I guess I should really quickly check if there's anyone up, that we could raid. I am not used to raiding people at this time of night, and unfortunately not a single person that I follow is currently live, which is in fact a bummer. And I do need to make myself a bigger list of people to raid. We will work on that because I would like to be able to raid people. We did get to raid Tango that one time, but our stream was longer today, so yes. Bangos watch you get it, and you'll have to tell Peanut about it. That would be really funny, though. I would love that. We'll see. But yeah. Yes, Benkos, if you have a suggestion, I would love a suggestion. I would love to raid someone. And yeah, Esme, I will absolutely give the kitties love for you. But yeah, like it's hard to like find new people to raid, especially when I'm not actually playing a game where I could be like, oh, I can do this. But it's hard to kind of trust strangers. So it's always nice to have a recommendation. So thank you. I will pop that open so that I can actually participate in the raid. And they are playing Baldur's Gate, Local Tiefling Mad at Illithid. That is a very good title. I will set up this raid. We will go see Ember Escape. Thank you very much for the recommendation, Banquos. Next novel to read, Jumper, Stephen Gould. Book is better than movie. Interesting. Maybe. Yeah, the movie was kind of mid, if I'm gonna be honest. But there are so many good books we could read. But yeah, I think I'd like to continue reading on Monday nights, but also it is going to take us literal months to get through this book. So we'll see. But yes, as always, I love you all. I will be back tomorrow at my usual time to play some World of Warcraft. Wednesday, if you are excited for some thirsty suitors for Valentine's, we will be doing that. We will be eating Valentine's junk food. We will be having a great time. And yeah, I will see you guys all tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here, and let's go meet and say hi to Ember Escape. Bye. Pabu Nation does hate squid faces.